Okay, everybody, it's almost 7 o'clock, so we'll call the meeting to order. Just prior to us looking at the agenda, I'd like to ask that we move agenda number 7, which is appointment of liaison counselors, to new business, which comes at the end. That will avoid any confusion throughout the evening of who's doing what role in what position, if that's okay. And on that basis, is there any motion of approval of the agenda as amended? Moved by Councillor Tower, seconded by Councillor Black. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We go to question period. Any questions from audience?
Hi, I'm Janet Hammock. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Mayor Hyam and the Sackville Town Council on your initiative to paint a rainbow flag on some of the crosswalks again this year. To me, it's a really visible symbol of Sackville's commitment to celebrating diversity and maintaining our community as a safe and welcoming place. I certainly feel welcome here. But somebody said, but they're illegal. And I said, well, how can that be? If you can have ducks on crosswalks, how come you can't have rainbows? So my question today is, are they illegal or are they legal? And could you just address that so we know what to answer? Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there seemed to be some confusion, and there was a memo from the Minister of Transportation, which he apparently released in error, that said it was illegal. And 2 days later, he rescinded that with a memo to all of the mayors in the province that that was an incorrect interpretation, that we have it in writing from, every town has it in writing that no, that is not an illegal practice. Yes, you can paint them so long, his only suggestion was that it be outlined in white, which we also have done. So you're correct, both the ducks and the rainbows are legal. Any other questions?
Hello, Brian Lane. First of all, I'd like to thank the mayor and the clerk for responding to my email last week. It was much appreciated.
Just pull that up a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a process question. I've been looking online trying to find the minutes for the Heritage Committee. When was the last time the Heritage Committee actually met?
I would have to defer to Mr. Burke. Do you have an answer to that?
Yeah, thank you. I believe the last meeting of the Heritage Board was in December of 2017.
Okay. Under the Heritage Bylaw, if there was to be new construction, which I understand in our heritage area there is some new construction going on, what would they have to do to satisfy the section under the Heritage Bylaw? Would they have to go to this committee, or is it part of the building permit process?
Again, Mr. Burke, please.
Yeah, if a development within one of the heritage conservation zones is a new construction, it would trigger the need for a heritage permit and would require a visit to the Heritage Board. That's correct.
Okay. Has there been a permit issued for the new construction going on in the heritage zone?
To date, there hasn't. I think we're all mindful that where we are with the heritage process. As you may recall, at last month's regular meeting, we held a public hearing on the repeal of the bylaw. So I know the developer is aware of that. In the event that the appeal is unsuccessful, there would have to be a heritage permit application filed before the board.
Okay, under the building permit process, would they have to comply with all relevant bylaws that are in effect at the time the building permit is issued?
Ms. Bickford.
Certainly any municipal bylaw that's in force at the time of application of a building permit would have to abide by any bylaws.
Has the building permit been issued for the development?
No, there's no
Okay.
permits issued.
Okay, is a town employee responsible for the heritage Have there been any discussions with the developer about complying with the bylaw? Because the bylaw is still in effect. I'm sure there must be drawings, architectural features and everything already set up. Should they not have been in contact with you at this point? And one more part. As a responsible town employee, should you not have been pursuing or letting you know what the requirements of the bylaw are?
It's a good question. I guess we can't force an individual to file a permit. The developer is aware that the property is currently within Conservation Zone A of the Heritage Conservation Area. And it's been fully explained to the developer in the event that the repeal of the bylaw is not successful, that there will be a subsequent conversation that has to take place. For new construction, it does require a board approval, and it is somewhat of a subjective process for board members, as there are no specific requirements in terms of a particular style of the building that have to be, other than it would need to complement the existing streetscape in the context of which it sits.
Okay. How about the fence bylaw? I noticed there's a pretty orange construction fence around the entire area. I'm assuming it borders on other people's property? Has there been a fence permit requested? Or has there been any checking to see if it's well within complying with the fence bylaw, which says it has to be 2 feet within the property? Well, I'm just wondering who enforces our bylaws?
CAO, please.
Basically, when you're in the heritage zone, well, first of all, anywhere in the town for building permits is the enforcement of our zoning development bylaw is enforced by the planning department. If you're in the heritage zone, it's a double, bylaw that kicks in under the heritage bylaw. So
Okay.
it gets caught in both areas. I think your last question in terms of fencing typically is done when building permits are issued, et cetera, and that would be handled by planning.
Okay, so this nice orange fence that's up there is already in place. Has there been a permit requested for that? Or are construction fences exempt from the bylaw? I mean, it would be impinging on probably town property, the Laffer's property themselves, because they own parts of it.
I would have to defer that to planning to answer what discussions that have occurred with the developer and where they're at in terms of what they're looking for.
So as far as the fencing requirements, under the zoning bylaw, if it's a structural fence that's being requested, that does fall under a building permit side of things. The type of temporary fencing that's up there now is more of a deterrent for people from entering onto that property, so it's considered more construction kind of related, and it doesn't fall under that bylaw. So,
Does our town bylaw differentiate between regular fences and construction fences?
well, that's what, the bylaw references structural fences, so that's
But
the things that we
does
would
it
require.
differentiate between what a structural fence is, a temporary fence, or does it just say fence?
It would be structural in nature, so yes, I would say it would differentiate between. That
Okay.
would not typically be classified as a fence under our bylaw.
Okay, so we're at the point where the developer has not asked for a building permit, I understand, but there's a fence in place. Is there some latitude in enforcing the bylaw, or we don't enforce our bylaws?
Which one are we not enforcing? I don't
The
understand.
fence bylaw. There is no construction permit yet, what they've said, but there is a fence in place.
I'm going to take a stab at it, but what I heard is that the planning officer just said that there is a differentiation between structural fence, which requires a permit, and a temporary fence, which discretion by the planning office does not look to have a permit issued for a temporary type fence. I think given the circumstances of where we're at, which is a very unusual situation. People are left to try and manage this or judge this in terms of, we have a development, no permit has been issued to proceed, and the developer is waiting on what the decision of council is going to be with respect to heritage, and is prepared to go through heritage if there is a heritage bylaw. If there is not a heritage bylaw, that's a different, set of regulations, being only planning that the developer would have to adhere to.
Okay, but what I understand the planner said was there is no building permit, so there has been no interaction that way, but we do have a fence in place.
Well, I think I just said that her
No, what you said
review.
was, what you said was,
Wait, no, you've had lots of questions, so let us have an answer first, and then you can reply to that.
I believe what she said was that there is a distinction between temporary and a structural fence, and no permit has been issued, and there is no structural fence in play, and given the circumstances, it's been allowed, but it has not been approved because there's been no permit required for it.
okay, in our,
There's a second example like that, which is the cannabis store, which is being constructed without a fence in parts of it and with a temporary fence in some other parts of it. So it's very similar to the scenario you're describing.
does our bylaw on fences differentiate between types of fences? That's the question then.
That's right. And
But does it differentiate? Does it say structural, temporary, or does it just say fence?
I believe we heard that it said structural fence.
Is there a definition attached to the bylaw?
I guess you'll have to,
There may not be a definition. That's something that I'd have to ask the planning officer to look at. Maybe she doesn't have the answer here this evening. However, I know bylaws tend to be amended and revised from time to time because there are weaknesses in them. And so if there isn't something there, that's something the council may wish to address. But in managing bylaws, an awful lot of discretion sometimes is required by staff and council in terms of trying to put into play what they feel is appropriate in the best interest of the citizens. So, so that happens quite often from time to time, and you try not to, and where there are major weaknesses, you fill them with language.
One more procedural question, nothing to do with the heritage bylaw. I'm just trying to get a handle. I see everybody on council using different types of notebooks. Are these personal notebooks that people are using for their council meetings? Does the town have a policy on acceptable use for town information which may or may not be confidential on these computers, as far as security, loss, et cetera?
yes, we do. Any other questions?
Fred Coulter. I just have a question. Up in Beach Hill Park, for years I've been asking for a proper garbage container up there at the entrance to the park. I've asked department heads, employees, students in the summertime, because every morning when I go there, there's garbage strung all over the place because the raccoons and the animals get in there. Now, we've spent thousands of dollars on that park with water, disc golf. I'm wondering if there's a reason why we can't have a proper garbage container with a lid on it to keep the garbage. I've left it around the garbage can thinking maybe staff would say, well, geez, we need a proper garbage can, but it's still the same.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Cole?
Thank you. Actually, we put a temporary cover on the garbage can outside the gate, and there is a work order to have it permanently fixed.
So,
There's going to be a new can there, or what are you going to do?
We're just going to put a proper lid that'll fasten down.
Because there's only a board on there now, and the raccoons are pulling it off, and we should be able to get something there decent. Because there's events going on. Pizza boxes are put around there, and they're thrown all over the place at night.
Yep.
Maybe something bigger, too.
okay, right. So we'll work on that. Thanks for bringing that forward. We've got a commitment. We're going to do something about that. Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. Okay, we will move on to disclosures of interest. Everybody's had an opportunity to look at the agenda. Are there any disclosures of interest? Deputy Mayor Aiken.
Thank you, Worship. I'll be recusing myself for the heritage bylaw votes.
Okay, thank you. Any other disclosures? Hearing none, we'll move to item 5, which is minutes. Page 3 of the meeting of June 11th. Regular council meeting. Moved by Councillor Mitten, seconded by Councillor Butcher. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Special meeting of July 3rd on page 13. Moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Any business arising from the minutes? None noted here. Okay. Number 7 has been moved. So number 8, Southeast Regional Services Commission. The Service Commission report will be done by Deputy Mayor Aiken this month.
Thank you, Worship. I'm reporting on the meeting at the end of June of the Southeast Regional Service Commission. There was a report from the Cultural Capital's presentation from Cultural Coast. And what they've been doing, they apparently this year distributing 15,000 maps and guides to tourists in the area. They do administrative work for Kent County, and they've been doing familiarization tours for people in the tourism industry. They spoke up in support of the RDMO, which was, as you'll hear in a moment, it's kind of ironic. If it's first industry-driven, second, there's an open dialogue with the Cultural Coast, and third, there's a rationalization in the use of resources. The second presentation was from a group called Southeast Racket Sports, who are planning on building a facility for tennis, badminton, squash in either Dieppe or Moncton. It was kind of unclear. And they hope to have it in place for the 2021 Francophone Games. We heard the RDMO consultant's report, and this was a consultant to figure out how to put a RFP together. And that was their principal mandate. They also identify strengths and weaknesses in the area. And the woman talked about marketing, capacity, and connectivity. And the conclusions they put forward was, first of all, to put the whole thing on hold, which was, I think, surprised a few people. They suggested expanding the mandate of a Moncton-led exercise, which is a little further down the road than the one the Commission was planning. Expand that to Southeast New Brunswick. And they suggested eventually any RDMO that's developed should include Kent County. And finally, there was a proposal put forward to consider on a regional basis water and waste management, policing, and what they called municipalization. I'm not entirely sure what that is. It's either amalgamation or turning LSDs into real municipalities. There's considerable, well, they first said the policing one wouldn't include Dieppe, Moncton, or Riverview because they had their own police. And I pointed out that Sackville did too. And at this point, it kind of, they decided they're going to hold off on doing this until they'll represent it in the fall. And with that, that's about when the meeting ended. And I have a motion if there are no questions.
Any questions on the Service Commission report? No? Okay.
Perhaps Lori should do her report first and then.
We'll move, we'll do that after the end of the, from the Planning Commission portion, and then we'll do your motion, okay? So we'll move to planning.
Thank you. So in the month of June, there were 7 permits that were issued. This brings our year-to-date total to be 29 permits at a construction value of $15,600,000 approximately. This time last year, there were 18 permits issued at a total construction value of $10.9 million. So we're up from last year's numbers. On June 27th, the Southeast Region, or the Southeast Planning Review and Adjustment Committee did meet regarding an application in the town of Sackville. It was a request by Chapman Brothers for temporary use application for the location of a temporary asphalt plant off Walker Road. And the committee did grant this approval subject to a couple terms and conditions, including setting the permission to operate until August 31st of 2018, after which it would have to be removed. And as well, including that any damage sustained to Walker Road is at their expense to repair, and that they seek all Department of Environment approvals regarding operation procedures for the asphalt plant. As for other projects, we have finalized the Robson Avenue, which is the ambulance service on in town, as well as the Main Street and York Street rezonings. And as well, we did attend the New Brunswick Planner Session on Planning and Design. This was hosted, or it was hosted by NB Planners, but Akistics did put on a session regarding design and principles around urban design. And went over an overview of several projects that they've worked on. This is the same group that did the Exit 506 study. And the other item, which has been alluded to tonight, is that we do have proposed readings of bylaw number 244G, which is the Bob Edgett Memorial Boxing Club rezoning, which is from R1 to institutional. So if there's any questions?
Any questions on the planning report? Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I have two, and the first one just came to me when you said that. The Akistics, when they talked about various projects, ours wasn't one of them.
Not in this particular session, they did not cover this one.
Okay. And my real question, or my main question is, I'm assuming that where the Chapman Brothers want to set up is not zoned appropriately now. Could you just clarify the distinction between a temporary use request and a rezoning request? Is it simply just for the time frame?
Generally speaking, that would be the main trigger. If it's a permanent use that's being proposed, certainly we would be looking for a rezoning, and it wouldn't fall under the criteria for temporary use. Temporary use is a tool that's given under the Community Planning Act, which council has to embed within their zoning bylaw to allow the Planning Review and Adjustment Committee to consider these. And generally speaking, it's a use that's not permitted under that zoning to occur for a period of up to 1 year or less, whichever is determined. And generally, when we're looking at them, we're looking at things of limited investment that's made and the permanency of the use itself. So how easily at the end of the term that it's given, that it can be removed and not remain within there. Certainly at the end of August 31st, they will no longer have the permission to operate from that location, and we would seek, if it is still in operation, we would seek removal of it.
Councillor Tower?
Thank you, Worship. Laurie, going by the map, I've seen where this place is. Now, I don't know what's involved with an asphalt plant. I only know some of the materials that are used in it and what trucks drop in, carry, whatever else along the way. I'm more concerned about the fact that we have a water supply in between that and the highway. We don't allow parking on the highway on that side, yet now we're going to allow an asphalt plant to create whatever. And I'm kind of concerned of whether you guys have looked at the fact that you could, or they could damage our water supply.
Certainly, the wellfield protected area is covered under Department of Environment as well. They are also the same body that would approve the order to operate a temporary asphalt plant as well. They're aware of the proximity to the wellfield. It is, the location of where it will be set up is outside that boundary. As you said, they will have to travel through, but Environment is aware of the location, and it does conform to their guidelines regarding the siting of temporary asphalt plants.
Any other questions? None. Deputy Mayor, you have a motion?
Thank you, Worship. I move that council give second reading section by section to bylaw number 244G, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, Town of Sackville zoning bylaw. Bylaw number 244G, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, Town of Sackville zoning bylaw. The council of the Town of Sackville, under the authority vested in it by Section 53 and in accordance with Section 59 of the Community Planning Act, SNB 2017, Chapter 19, amends bylaw 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw, and enacts as follows. Bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw, is amended by changing the zoning as shown in the zoning map figure 1 of the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw for the property identified as PID 00903302, as shown on Schedule A attached here to and forming part hereof, from urban residential R1 to institutional I.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 244G, a bylaw to amend bylaw number 244, the Town of Sackville zoning bylaw.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Tower. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Regional Services Commission reports. We move to Mayor's report. Second. And those of you who have a copy, a few things happened in the last couple of weeks. One was, as you know, I met the VP of CN Rail at FCM. I followed that up with a fairly detailed email giving context of what we talked about and types of things we'd like to see from them. Have not yet heard a reply to that, although I believe staff is meeting with some of the senior staff in the near future on some of those topics. Many of you attended the Sports Wall of Fame ceremonies, as did I. Alzheimer's Society has hired a local contact for this area. She attended the walk in the park and subsequently made contact with us. She's very interested, sees this area as a leader in many of the things going on with dementia and Alzheimer's, and would like to follow up a little more closely on some of our age-friendly / dementia-friendly ideas and initiatives. On that front, age-friendly designation, as you know, the advisory committee asked that we apply for a provincial designation. We got a reply, which in essence gave us partial designation and a request for certain things to be discussed with them. And I have turned that over to the committee and asked them to contact them directly about what that relationship might or might not look like, as it was their request to go for the designation anyway. So we'll see what their recommendation is after they've had that talk. Several of you were at the guides and the tree planting ceremony down at by the baseball field the other day. That looks good. The trees look great. Congratulations to them on getting that grant and offering to plant a few more trees in the town. Continue to have discussions with people about car chargers. These are come in several varieties, including very expensive, very intensive ones that take about 20 minutes to refill about 80 to 90% of a car's battery. It actually apparently takes that long again to finish that job on those high capacity ones. Those are the ones that tend to be on a highway where people come in, stop for a coffee and a donut, and then they'll get 80% charge back and they can go another 400 or 500 kilometers. There are also slow ones which work overnight, which tend to be in apartments and buildings where people park overnight or homes themselves. I did run into Mr. Wilson Mike Wilson from AIL, who now has a totally electric car and has a charger at his office. And so he has some real practical facts about how electric cars are and their charges are in our context here now. So we continue to see whether there may be some options for us to get some funding to do this on a larger basis. So we'll keep you informed as to how that unfolds. Attended the high school graduation ceremony and enjoyed that, listening to Peter Hess talk about his high school memories. As you recall, we drafted a resolution on local flooding around railway tracks last year from the Zone 2 meeting. I worked on that for a couple of times, sent it to the UMNB for a reply, kind of advice, and also to a couple of local mayors. I heard back from UMNB. I responded to that. I have not heard back again. However, it may now be moot because we're talking about doing it as ourselves to the UMNB, which I think may be a much better route because this has been ongoing for nearly a year now of trying to get it through. Various groups have approached me about the new housing announcements by the federal government. There's an affordable housing initiative, and there's also some money for disabilities, disabled housing, and some for veterans attached to it as well. The nuance is that in the past, municipalities have not been eligible for these funds. These ones, some of them are. And we'll talk a little bit about that because we explored that at the FCM, which when the FCM comes up, I'll talk about this topic a little bit more. So I have had lots of interest from individuals wondering if something can happen, and I've reached out to a couple of people to get us together to maybe have a thought exchange about that. Same sort of thing, a couple of individuals separately have approached me about a downtown entry to the Waterfowl Park, particularly me being the 30th anniversary. We tend to have one up at the Visitors Center, and that's it. So we always don't have people coming downtown. So if there was a way to get people to come in from either exit and stop downtown to see the Waterfowl Park, they feel that would be an addition to the Vic Center walk-in. So some interest in that. Not a lot of resolutions to it, but lots of inquiries about it. Same as last month, we have had lots of inquiries about the Terra Beata plant and what's going on there. And they are working, the Terra Beata vans are there almost every day. They're working hard at it, but we do not have any role in how they want to announce their plans. So we've urged them to make an announcement, but at this point they're not ready to do that, and they're just going ahead with their preparations for expanding that plant and getting a new business up and running. I attended the Open Skies AGM as I did last year. It was a very, very interesting meeting. They had been subjected to multiple reviews of their operation and their outcomes and their methods, and they received not one suggestion for change. In essence saying, you guys are ahead of us, we don't know how we can improve this, so we're gonna watch what you do. So it's a fascinating result, and there were people who drove down from Campbellton to attend this AGM because of how leading edge this practice is and the results are. So we should be proud of what they're doing, and it also brings a few other opportunities for how that service might be provided around here. It's the annual Wetland Center at the high school, applies for financial funds every year, so they asked once again for the 20th time that we support their applications, which we did. So hopefully they will be successful for the 20th time and be able to operate financially. Some of you may have gotten a mail out. It went around this area, including Amherst and Sackville, from a graduate student from Dalhousie who had questions about a variety of the landscape features of this area. And apparently there are a couple of different questionnaires, which is part of their experimental design, but some of them included references to marsh barns, windmills, and farms, etc. And the intent is to understand the value that individuals place on the landscape of the Chignecto Isthmus. So I reached out to both the student and her supervisor, and while I was in Halifax on other business, I met with them both to talk about what their intent was, why there was some confusion amongst people who had stopped and ask what the survey was about. And we had a very interesting chat. I also indicated that I thought that some of the present issues weren't in that survey. Like there was nothing about the exterior of the marsh. There was nothing about flooding. There's nothing about the heritage that's in danger. There's nothing about the railway track, et cetera. So they understood that. They had their own study objectives that they wished, and ended up saying that what they feel is that the results of these surveys, and one, we recommend anybody who got a survey in the mail to turn it back in, fill it out and send it back in, because it is something that they need is a high response rate, and they've actually said at that point they had about a 35% response rate, which is generally pretty good for a mail out. But they also indicated that they would share the results with us here in the town, and also were interested in some of the questions that we are raising in terms of the long-term landscape and how it might look here due to questions of flooding and protection of assets and things like that. So in essence, they've said that they would love to help us out at the next stage of that, so to keep that line of communications open. We, Shad, which you may have heard, we have a very busy town today. I don't know if people walking around, but we had 43 people with the Shad group, and we have a youth leadership group up at Mount Allison, and we have the summer camp children walking around. So it's a really busy streetscape at the moment. Shad is I think we talked about that before. It's STEM-based students in high schools that apply to go to these camps at various universities across the country. This is the first time there's been one here, and they have arrived about a week ago, and we had an introduction here in this room with every seat full of the students, and it was a very good exchange about why they were here, why we were here, how we operate, what the future of this territory looks like, and very interesting questions. Of course, Canada Day went on, and so many of you were there serving cake and such. The couple of other, I'll come back to this last, the education one in a moment. I did get a question which perhaps we can ask staff to consider, which was in the heat wave, there were in cities a manner of monitoring individuals that were living alone and may be at risk, and the question was if we have something similar to that. For the first time, we had a couple of days where that would have been a problem, and I thought it was a good question. I thought that was something we should reply to, or perhaps put up on the website at some point when we have some direction on that. So I think there may well be some informal. We talk about looking out for your neighbors, but I'm not sure that there is a full understanding of where people may be at and what risks that heat might bring to them. So I just put that out to people that I think that was a very good question to ask us. Deputy Mayor and myself met. The Regional Service Commission has hired a regional trails advisor, and he came here to see what our vision was about trails, share his, and also to note that he has a skill set in planning and in physical development of trails, and his job is to help wherever people want to build trails. So he's available if our staff wish to take advantage of him and his skills and experience, and he does have some interesting ideas about where he'd like to go on a regional basis as well. And I spent most of this last weekend on an education reform symposium we held at Marshlands. It was mostly put on by the ADM from the Department of Education, but we had wide representation at the table from New Brunswick's former chief economist, from University of Moncton, somebody from technology in UNB, somebody from entrepreneurship from UNB, entrepreneurship from Mount Allison. We had, of course, our guest was from the Harvard University, who came to advise us on how Harvard supplies some services to education and other topics under development. They do it for a variety of topics, but this one was one of interest to Harvard in terms of a multi-language education reform. So they're quite interested in perhaps assisting how that might happen. We had other people from communications and a small group, but a very, very good discussion. Mount Allison VP was there one day. Sorry, I can't think of too many others off the top of my head, but it was a very rounded discussion over what is education reform? Where is it at? Is Sackville leading this process? If so, how is it going to move ahead from here on? How does the province pick up on it? What role might Harvard play in this? I don't know that we have any answers to all of those questions. I'm waiting to see what our report is, but there was a lot of enthusiasm for the approach to education reform that has been discussed here, and also where it's at and what the opportunities are, particularly focused on what the economic opportunities are for the place that does this first, which is us. So how do you turn this into research centers? How do you turn new knowledge and new student knowledge into activities that become businesses? How do you scope those businesses? How do you finance them, and where does it come from? So the head of the New Brunswick Business Council attended this and was really pushing for us to understand that it's not just an education question. This is an economic development and business question as well. Whatever helps make our labor force more effective and efficient helps business, which helps our provincial economy. So very interesting ideas. So I'm open to questions on my report. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. Fascinating stuff. I have some trivial statements, but I want to get one out. I've been asked by a lot of people about Terra Beata too, and I said, well, it's private, and they get to make the announcement when they want to, but I want to take this opportunity in public to urge them to fill the information vacuum, because it's a good story, and some of the stuff that people are speculating about is really weird. So I would encourage them, if they're listening, to tell the world about it. I do have a question about entrances to the waterfowl park. By my count, there are 2 entrances downtown, one behind Painted Pony and one at the corner where the Arts Wall is. So I'm a little confused what maybe the definition of an entrance is.
Yeah, and a good point, because while there is a path that enters, there is no parking. All of that parking is private parking, and there is no space to come down, park downtown, go into the trails, or go into the downtown, because that's a private parking area. And that is a site that everybody is talking about, which should have an ability to park, to go into the park. So thanks for the clarification. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you. We'll move to the CAO's report, please.
Thank you, Worship. Somewhere my report is on a certain page in your package. 19, thank you. Anyway, on the administrative front, operationally, I guess things have also been very busy, as you can find out and will hear from the various department reports. There's a lot of activities at this time of year, as the mayor's alluded to, with activities as well as groups visiting, et cetera. I'll leave the details to come out in those reports. I will make mention, since the report has already been presented on the planning front, though, how pleasing it is to see the significant progress in the development front in terms of the number of permits, as well as the construction value overall for the town. Certainly bodes well, or we certainly, from a financial perspective, hope it bodes well on our total assessments to assist us in the upcoming budget in 2019. So we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that. Capital projects, there's been lots of development on a number of fronts, and that's this is the time of year for a lot of those to be tackled. So our department heads are busy in each of the departments to see those go forward. As we all know, we did have a setback on the Phase 2 at Lawrence Street, and we have followed up with the consultants and asked them to get back to us with their analysis and in terms of where they went off the rails, in terms of missing, in terms of their budget and the overall bids that were submitted. Certainly the bids that came in seem to be all in and around the same level, so there's no inconsistency in that regard, but it was quite a distance from where we were, where the consultants had indicated it would be. So we were looking to have that meeting with council so that you can hear directly from the consultants, and then we'll decide at that point, just what the options are and what direction that the council wishes to take. So with that, Your Worship, I'll leave it at that, and if there's any questions, certainly be prepared to try and address them.
Question for the CAO report? Nope. Hearing none, we move to next item, which is finance and admin.
Part one's over there.
Who's going first? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council accept the bills and payroll for the month of June 2018 as follows. General Government, $898,235.02. General Capital, $106,402.01. Utility Government, $218,062.50. Utility Capital, $59.11. And salaries, $221,939.97.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Tower. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
Mr. Chair, I have to ask. I should have asked before the motion. May I have permission to ask a question now about what we just passed? Can you explain why an item that's usually 6 figures is $59?
Yeah, the utility capital, there's only one small invoice paid for some material that they're getting relating to lift stations for the month. So it was just starting to purchase, and then July will be busier with materials that they're purchasing. So it's based on actual invoices. So there was only one small invoice for the month.
Thank you. Okay, we've moved to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Tower.
The information is on pages 22 to 29, which also includes the bylaws enforcement and animal control. Financial statements are included to the end of June, and we are halfway through the year, and accounts will continue to be monitored where most budgets remain on target. As previously requested and in accordance with the bylaw relating to council enumeration, we have created and posted online council expense reports. This report has been prepared as of June 30th, 2018, and will be updated regularly and reposted on the website for review. Water and sewer readings were done to June 29th for the period of April 1st to June 30th. It is anticipated these will going out this week to the public. We continue to work on the collection of the water and sewer shutoff letters that were sent out back in September of 2017. And as of June 29, 2018, we have collected $58,124.89 of the $69,883.69, so approximately 83.2% of the total. 2018 dog tags remain available at Town Hall and were due March 31st and are now subject to a $20 late fee. We are reviewing tags sold in 2018 versus prior years to ensure that those who have dogs in town are registered. They are subject to a fine in addition to the registration fees. Council discussed resolutions relating to the up-and-coming UMB meetings, and are considering 3 resolutions tonight that, if we pass, will be submitted for consideration by all New Brunswick municipalities. Bylaws, officer enforcement reports, as I said, are attached here. And we have been provided with a notice of resignation by our bylaws officer, Brian Bell, effective July 20th, as he has accepted a position elsewhere. We wish him all the best in his future endeavors, and we thank him for his 3+ years of service. Finance is presenting a motion tonight to authorize Brooke Wilson, who has worked with us before, to enforce our bylaws while we work to fill the vacant position. And she will be contracted to perform the work in a short-term basis. And I have to personally say that it's been a pleasure working with Brian. He's done such a great job setting up that Brooke should have lots of guidance to move forward, and we should be able to go seamless from now to the new one coming in. So kudos to his great job. And I will have a motion if there's no questions.
Councillor Black.
I just want to say too that it's a loss that for Brian Bell to not be in Sackville anymore. I often heard people complain about him, so that seems to me that he was doing a good job. So I have a few questions on the financial side. Is there any indication at this point where the money to pay for the excavator is going to come from, since it wasn't unbudgeted? Has that?
Yeah, the axle, the over budget was in the $60,000 range. So at this point, we're still reviewing, and within the utility operating budget, it is hoped that we will have sufficient savings within the operating budget and/or increased revenue that will hope to offset that. We've only had this will be the second water billing going out, so until we get through at least the third bill, we won't know exactly where our overall revenue is, as it's the majority of revenue comes from the user pay system. So, but at this point in time, we don't have that finalized yet.
Thank you. I'd also would request maybe that the council expense report be included in the regular council package or special council package. Is that a possibility, just in the vein of transparency, rather than just being only on the website? Is that, I don't know, what do people feel about that?
We can if council requested that. I think the bylaw that was approved indicated that we put online. It didn't indicate. Some months may be difficult depending on the report timing, but we can endeavor to do that even on a quarterly basis or something. Attach it in.
And just one more. With regards to phase one, when will it be at 100% completion? Because it had said in the report that the claim 6 when the project is at 100% completion. Is there any time frame for that, or?
Yep, there's two things for that. First thing is contractors' holdbacks that have yet to be released. So until those contractor holdbacks are released, we will not be finalizing a final claim yet on that, as well as there's remains some dollars that are available and remain to be spent under phase one. So that we'll have to undertake as well before that is at 100%. And then there's also a number of reports that have to be filed once we have expensed all the funds and have everything ready to go before they will release the final 10% of that. So the project it was approved in the 4 million range, so they kept back 400,000 until all the paperwork is submitted. That's basically their insurance policy to ensure that everything they want is submitted before they'll release the final check. So I would expect it won't be until the fall of this year or even into the spring of 2019, as we have until March 2020 to finalize that.
Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I'd just like to pile on Brian as well. I thought he did his job very professionally and with good humor, and I'm going to miss him. I thought he was an excellent bylaws officer. I'm also a little bit conflicted because his report is given here, and a significant part of his report always has a line for unsightly premises. I want to suggest, and maybe I should do it under policy bylaw, but I want to suggest that council perhaps revisit our dangerous and unsightly premises bylaw this is the first issue that I dealt with when I was a counselor at a regional meeting. Everybody's been complaining about it, and these old guys said, we've been trying to deal with this for years. It's a constant problem, but I think it's something that we need to deal with, and there's some things in the new Local Governance Act that might help us address this. So I'm just putting that out there. I think maybe policy bylaw could consider this. Maybe council should discuss it at a discussion meeting, but it's something that's been brought to our attention in communication to all of us, but certainly several people have spoken to me about it, and I think we should revisit it.
That's a good idea. This may be something we should also be talking about at UMNB, because what we were hearing from the Regional Service Commission was that there was a very minor change in the substantial part of the legislation, but there is an opening to creating new regulations that will give us more of an outline of specific actions that could be taken. So it may be that we have to work through UMNB to create that type of a regulatory regime, but we're going to have to push UMNB to do that. So I agree with the topic, though, yes. And, okay. Councillor Tower?
Thank you, Your Worship. I move that whereas council has adopted various bylaws, and whereas the municipality wishes to ensure the proper enforcement of its bylaws by appointing an appropriate person to such position. Now therefore be it resolved that the following person is hereby authorized, designated, and appointed to act for and on council's behalf in order to properly enforce all the municipality's bylaws pursuant to the municipality's authority outlined below. Brooke Wilson, effective July 17, 2018. Be it further resolved that the above noted authorization, designation, and appointment is subject to the following: 92-1, 93-1, 94-1, and 98 of the Community Planning Act in order to enter upon property, issue orders, seek orders from the Court of the Queen's Bench, and commence proceedings in provincial court. 10, 1 through 6, 11, 12, 13, 14, 1 and 2, 15, 1 to 8, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, and 72A of the Local Governance Act in order to serve tickets, commence proceedings in provincial court, enter upon properties and issue notices of dangerous and unsightly premises, and 14 of the Police Act in order to serve tickets and properly execute their role as a bylaw enforcement officer. Be it further resolved that the above noted authorization, designation, and appointment shall continue until the person ceases to be employed / contracted by the municipality, or until the appointment is limited or rescinded by council.
Moved by Councillor Tower, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken. Question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. We move to item D, Tourism and Business Development. Starting, Councillor Mitten, please.
Thank you. The report is found on page 30. We met on June 28th, and I'd like to highlight some of the key points. Visitor parties for 2018 were 501, which represents 1,411 people. In 2017, we had 443 visiting parties, meaning we are up over last year. The highway signs have been replaced, and feedback so far has been very positive. The Cultural Coast held a board meeting in June, and the AGM was held June 15th. A motion to renew our membership for 2018 will be coming forward at this council meeting. The manager also participated in a Fundy Bay partnership board meeting. The department held a very successful Sackville Frontline Tourism Workers Tour on June 26th, and 18 workers from 8 local businesses participated. The department hosted a successful New Brunswick Trails Day and Waterfowl Park Expert event on June 9th. We are pleased to welcome Windy Bikes to the parking lot of the Visitor Information Center, where they will be renting bicycles throughout the summer months. And the department is investigating supporting an import replacement workshop sometime in the near future. This workshop would look at ways that businesses in Sackville can buy things locally rather than bringing them in from outside. So we are looking at the possible partners and if it's an economically viable thing to do to hold this workshop. So I do have a motion unless there are questions.
Questions on the report? Councillor Black?
I just had a statement first. I just wanted to say that it's nice to see that the VIC numbers are up. I had heard last year there was a bit of skepticism about whether the VIC was an important part of Sackville, and I guess that those were deemed unfounded. I think the VIC is a very important part to our town. Just a few questions. The Waterfowl Park tour numbers at 8, is that high or low, or like?
Thank you, Councillor. I think it's about the same as we had last year. We're trying to work to get more people onto the tours, so we're hoping that number will rise, but it's about average for this month. Yeah.
And do you have any more info on the Windy Bikes? Anything else that you can tell us about that? And also the import replacement workshop. I know it hasn't happened yet that you're working towards it, but what is any more information on that, or stakeholders that might be sort of interested in that?
I don't have any information with me about Windy Bikes, but I could certainly circulate something with some of their hours. It's a new local business. Leandra Fahey is the operator, and she's entered a mobile merchant license with us. So we're letting her use a corner of the parking lot, and so far it seems to be going well, and I think she's getting some people out to rent the bikes. The import replacement workshop, this is something that the Center for Local Prosperity has kind of proposed, and we've met with a couple of, we met with Julia Felton from the Commons and Michael Fox, and we had kind of a brainstorming session to look at possible partners. So I think within the next week or two, we'll be reaching out to some other groups in town to kind of get a steering committee going. And we need to find out from the Center for Local Prosperity exactly what they have in mind for the workshop and what the cost of it would be and how we would potentially fund that, or as Councillor Mitten mentioned in her report, if it's economically viable for us to do that. So.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. Highway signs, they're great, very attractive, but there's no power to them yet, is there? I don't think there is out on the marsh. I can still see the wires right on the side of the sign, and I don't know about Beach Hill, but.
We've working with a local electrician. He's got the PO to do the signage, and of course he's got to get the lights back up, and then we've got to work with NB Power to go and hook the physical power. So the one at out by CBC, we got disconnected in order to take the sign down, so we had to remove the sign or the lighting system so that the sign could be down, put the new face on. So they've put that back, but now we're waiting for NB Power to physically connect the power back over to the mast, and that's the same scenario with the one up on Walker Road exit. Everything's in place, but we're just waiting for NB Power to do the final hookup there.
That's a shame they're not lit, because this is when our traffic's heavy, and at nighttime it'd be a great thing to see too. So, right, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor Mitten, you have a.
Yes, and if I can just add something first to respond to Councillor Black's question. I attended the Cooperative Enterprise Council of MB's AGM, and they had a presentation on import replacement, and they afterwards circulated a presentation and a report on that, so I can circulate that to council if that would be helpful to give more context about what that is. And now I have a motion. I move that council approve the membership into the New Brunswick Cultural Coast in the amount of $4,438.79.
Moved by Councillor Mitten, seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken.
And maybe we can ask. for a
Could
bit
ask
of
for a little
background.
context for that, Mr. Kelly-Sparrows?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. In brief, we've been a member of the Cultural Coast since 2010. It represents municipalities all the way from Dorchester around through us up the coast, all the way to Kushipiquak. There are, I think, 13 municipalities that are represented. It is currently our only regional tourism organization. We were a little bit uncertain what to do for budgeting for it when we went into this year, because we didn't know what was going to happen with the RDMO proposed by the Service Commission. But as it appears to be on hold, and as we have been certainly using the resources of the Cultural Coast, and we have quite a number of members also in town, we thought it would make sense to continue on for the rest of this year and then visit it again in the fall to see if we wanted to continue for another year.
Thank you. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Mitten. Move to item E, Public Properties and Facilities. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Your Worship. The information's on pages 32 to 34. During the month of June, Public Works Department finished the evaluation of the roads scheduled for resurfacing, made all the necessary repairs to road shoulders, ditching, culverts, and any other necessary repairs to the roadways scheduled for paving under the gas tax fund. The Public Works Department completed the majority of the line painting on crosswalks, parking spaces, directional arrows throughout the town during the month of June. And I believe, Dwayne, they're pretty close to finish now?
Yes, thank you, Councilor Torrey. Yes, most of them have been done. There are just a few minor things that we'll be working on over the next, as weather permits, over the next week or so. Yes.
The patching program for 2018 continued during the month of June, and they have completed most of the patching throughout the town at this time. The contractor is scheduled to come back in the fall to finish up any necessary patching as a result of summer construction work, any potholes that appear throughout the summer months. The Public Works Department finished up most of the spring cleaning of the damaged area due to winter control operations. The Public Works Department installed the cast iron flower pots in the downtown area in preparation of planting the flowers. The Utility Department completed the annual flushing program during the month of June, and we want to thank the residents for their patience and understanding in this process. The Engineering Department continued work with WSP to finalize the design and drawings for the tender of 2018-07 Main Street Reconstruction Project from Dufferin to Queens Road. The tender for this project was issued on June 15th and closed June 5th, and there will be a recommendation coming in a motion tonight for council. The Engineering Department continue to work with Crandall Engineering on the design of the Lawrence Street reconstruction and storm mitigation. As we've heard already, we got the shock and now they're doing their reevaluation. As part of the Lawrence Street reconstruction and stormwater mitigation project, an EIA was required as part of phase 2 of this project. The EIA determined that determination has been received by the minister, and the town is required to follow through with with all aspects of the determination, which has added cost to the overall project. A motion will be coming forward during the regular council meeting tonight. Engineering Department is working with Mount Allison University to evaluate the crosswalk at Windsor Hall on Main as one of the busiest crosswalks around the town, as well as for safety concerns. This crosswalk is considered for crosswalk lighting system. Several options are being considered, and a proposal will be presented in the future. The Engineering Department continues to work with additional tenders that will be issued over the next few months, which include the ball field shed and garbage collection and disposal contract. Tantamar Veteran Memorial Civic Center, the Sackville Minor Lacrosse finished their season into June. The staff is doing building maintenance as time permits during the summer. Staff has completed the installation work for the new EMO building, as well as topsoil and hydroseed. And if anybody wants to book rentals there, go to bookings at sackville.com. Municipal parks. The potable water has been approved for consumption at Beach Hill Park. The water will be tested regularly as part of the water sampling program. The hanging baskets, street boxes from flower pots and flower beds have been installed. Staff have added an additional portable toilets to the Sackville's, to the town's public restrooms. The location of the public restrooms around the town are as follows. 2 exterior washrooms at Bill Johnson's Activity Center, an added portable toilet next to the parking lot on Ford Lane, 2 outhouses at the Waterfowl Park, an additional portable toilet on the rail bed next to the kiosk behind Rob Lyons, a portable toilet on Wellington Street, and another on Dufferin Street by the ball fields, 5 outhouses at Beach Hill Park, 1 portable toilet at Tantramar Regional High School soccer field, the library, the civic center, and the visitor information center, and the town hall all have public restrooms during the operation hours. The staff are busy watering, weeding flower beds, enlarging and weeding the tree circles, prepping the sports fields, delivering for events, mowing and general maintenance and projects in the parks. Exit 506 beautification is an ongoing process. The wildflowers last year did not take, so they've been replanted. Rose bushes and trees are coming along fine. The mowing in this area will be done when the areas are dry enough to run trackless mowers. Staff are using trimmers currently around the new beds to make maintenance easier. Staff had an opportunity to attend the Atlantic Recreation and Facilities Conference in Charlottetown, PEI at the 1st of June. This was a good opportunity for them to network and discuss facility issues with other communities who are also dealing with these. There is also a trade show that gave them an ability to talk to the vendors from various companies that we currently are working with, as well as some new ones who may have useful products for future projects. And that is that part of the.
Councillor Evans, you were first, I think.
Yeah, my first comment is I'm pleasantly surprised by the number of public toilets that we have available in this town. I had no idea there were so many. I can remember on previous council, people imploring us, there aren't public washrooms available. And then when we did the Bill Johnstone Park, there were going to be some there. And we all know about the Civic Center, or excuse me, the Visitor Information Center. But by my quick count, there are at least a dozen porta potties around town, and this is great. So, I mean, it's enough to make some people, immature people, giggle, but I think it's a good public service. The second one is I'm delighted to see that the rainbow crosswalks have been done. I had several people ask me, I made an inquiry, and it's almost like I have some kind of power. I got a response at noon today saying they're done. So I was really pleased to see that and what it symbolizes. I do have a question. There was something there about tenders going out, and this one is about the garbage tender. And the recommendation for staff, as it was in the discussion meeting package, indicated that we would continue to exclude pickup for apartments of more than 4 units. And I have a huge amount of respect for staff, and so I expect that I will be convinced. But I would like to request if staff could be briefed, if council could be briefed by staff on what's behind that decision, that recommendation. And then we can share that with the public, because I expect that I will become convinced and I will support the tender, but right now I would like to request somehow that we get a presentation. I know that some individual councillors have received that information, and I think it would be more effective if we all got it. So I'm going to just make that request, looking at the chair, at the mayor, and see if that couldn't be addressed.
Well, I guess the first question is if this is a shared question, because I thought that it was debated when we brought it up, and Councillor Mitten asked for additional information on her own. You weren't at that session, so I'm not sure that we've already given direction to staff to do something. Does all of council need to meet again? I guess that's my question for council. most of us seem to have given direction, so I'm confused whether we would halt the direction or suggest we're going back on that direction. I'm not clear.
Sure. As I confess, I was not at the meeting, but I did watch it and listen to the discussion meeting, and I was under the impression that at least one councillor had a question and was going to seek information, but I did not. My recollection was we had not issued direction. This is a tender which needs to be operational on January 1st, and I didn't realize it was that time sensitive. If I've missed my shot, then I will make a request individually to get the information that I require.
Well, why don't we do that? Because I did speak to Councillor Mitten, she did speak to
Yes.
Mr. Acton later. Maybe you and I should talk about some of the background to it, and maybe you and Dwayne could talk, and then we could see whether we should hold a meeting or not.
Okay. I mean, that's your call. I want to get the information. I'm not comfortable with it yet. I expect I will be, but if everybody else is comfortable and I'm just out here on the margins again, then I will seek redress that way.
Okay. Councillor Black, I think you were second.
Okay, let me get my, I think it's the list for the public washrooms is really great as well. I'll say that. It might be nice to have a list somewhere. Maybe is it listed on the town's website as to where all the public washrooms are? It might just be nice for people to be able to access that. Just because when I used to work downtown, I'd get people in constantly to use the bathroom at the business I worked at, and often they would say, "Oh, there's no bathrooms in town." I mean, obviously there are, but it'd be nice if people maybe had access to that somehow, potentially. The crosswalk at Windsor, it says several options are being considered and a proposal could be presented in the near future. Is there any proposal for maybe putting something more than just a lit light in there, like maybe an extended walk light or something, to try to potentially slow foot traffic a little bit and have that area not so bogged up with vehicles?
Mr. Acton?
Thank you, Councilor Black. Yes, indeed, there is. I've had several discussions with Mount Allison University, who's very concerned, and so we're having discussions. There are a few options that I've at least presented to them, and one would be like an RA5 that you see at the post office and King Street and the Civic Center. That's what we call an RA5 crosswalk. Push button. That is one option. There is also another option which is called a mid-block crosswalk, where it's kind of more like I'll call it a one-way intersection type thing, where there is both direction for traffic, so you have a red, a green, and an amber light for traffic, the vehicle traffic, and then foot traffic have the right away or the do not walk symbol. That's another option, and I've provided this some information back to the university, and they're evaluating, and obviously it would be a potential cost-sharing venture between, say, the town and the university. And so once we have a proposal to put together, that's something that definitely I'd be bringing back to council for any approvals or comments at that time.
I'm just going to put it out there. I lived in Boston for a while, and in Harvard Square, there's a massive crosswalk, and they found that one of the ways to reduce traffic getting bogged down and pedestrians walking back and forth was to widen the crosswalk. So you would have a walk light, but you would make it extra wide, because if you watch people walk across that street, they walk in this little tiny path. It's almost like they can't imagine that they could step outside those bounds. But if the crosswalk was wider, then maybe more people would go across at once, and I don't know, maybe that just possibility. But and I had one more question. So the EIA, are we required to do the work that was covered in the EIA, even if phase 2 doesn't kind of pan out the way that we want it to? If it changes, do we still have to do that the EIA stuff because we had to do it?
So the majority of it, yes. And I say that because in the EIA, there's, if we're digging out where the new Abido is going to go, so if the new Abido happens, there's a section in there that we have to hire an archaeologist to be on site during the dig. So if that Abido goes, then yes, that will go. If the Abido, for whatever reason, doesn't get built under phase 2, then no, that section of it won't. But all the other, most of the other sections are things that are required by us, because we will potentially be doing any of the work. Some of the work will be in those wetland areas. So the bird survey, field surveys, all of those will have to be done. But there is, like, for example, that one that may not, depending on whether an Abido is built or not.
Just to follow up, so the motion that we're going to be talking about tonight, maybe should I discuss this at the motion? Okay, I'll save my question then. Thank you.
Councillor Finney was next, I think.
Yeah, I want to bring up the crosswalk issue again. Dwayne, how did that issue come to light? I know it was brought up many times ago over the last 14 years that we've been on, Joyce and I. And at the time, one time, as a matter of fact, there was an assessment done of that number of people going across there by Mike Fox's class. And then, of course, Rob McCormick turned around and had people do it as well. And he wasn't overly impressed with Mike Fox's assessment. And they turned around and said there was no problem there. We, at the time, wanted to co-share with the crosswalk guard or whatever. They didn't want anything to do with it. So how did this come to light again? Who brought it forward? The town? The university? I'm curious.
No, it was the university. I have biweekly meetings with facilities management, Neil McEachran, and he raised kind of it as a general statement, looking at a few different crosswalks and lighting and stuff, and we review things like that on a regular basis. And specifically, they honed in on this one and are very eager to have some type of partnership to try to make that crosswalk safer for pedestrians and vehicle traffic as well coming around the corner. So we're at least looking at options, and again, that will be brought back to council at some point.
So they'll be willing to turn around and co-share on this? Or is the town going to have to pay for it?
Well, I can't speak for Mount A or for Neil, but he seemed willing to discuss that partnership, yes. Again, that will be all part of a proposal that he and I would bring back to council at some point, would be if that's an option, which he had indicated it was at the time.
Just to let the public know, Neil McEachran is a new guy at the university. He's in charge of facilities management. He is a real believer in safety. We're now wearing safety hats, as a matter of fact, hard hats, and suspenders that so people can see us and everything. So this idea coming forward from Neil, I can understand why it's come forward again. And I thank you for your information.
Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Finney kind of stole some of my thunder, because I recall when the study was done and how the town at that time had offered to co-share the cost of crossing guards. I don't think any amount of lights that you put up there is going to be worth a bit of good at all until the students put their cell phones in their pocket and realize that they are crossing a highway, not just a street on Mount A campus. It is a through highway there. And they'll come down either one way or the other on that crosswalk. They have no more idea whether there's 6 cars or whether there's one that's sitting there waiting. They've just got that cell phone in their hand, and they have the right of way, they figure. And I guess pedestrians do, but it gets awful irritating when you're sitting there in a long lineup and they're just going along. And I still think the crossing guard that's the way to go, because when they're, especially at their meal times, they don't have to be there the whole 8 hours or whatever. But there's busy times of the day, and I've seen cars stopped way back as far as the Anglican Church, bumper to bumper, while they just won't take any, they just keep going. And once in a while, you'll get the student that'll stop, but generally, they're just by themselves. So, anyway, that's my thought on the lights and how useful they'd be there. Thank you.
Councillor Minton.
Thank you. To kind of respond to what Councillor Evans brought up in terms of garbage sorting, I did meet with Mr. Acton, and he provided a lot of useful information. I do think that information, it would be useful if it was shared with the public to help explain. This is an issue that I know is coming to me and some other councillors. People are wondering about the garbage sorting issue, and it is quite complicated. I have been pursuing this, speaking with different people, and I think likely the province needs to be involved. It's very difficult for a municipality to address on its own. I do wonder, I don't know if administratively it's too difficult, but if we could potentially add in the tender so that we could see what the cost would be for units that have more than, or for buildings that have more than 4 units. So even if we don't go down that road, we know what the pricing does look like. So, thank you.
Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. A couple of things. One, I agree that the rainbow crosswalks look fantastic. I brought it up last year, a concern, and Janet Hammack in her email also addressed the same concern, that we have not left a space for bikers who go by, and on wet days it could be problematic for them. So if we can make that small adjustment for next year, maybe it will make, I don't know if you can do anything now or not.
Mr. Acton?
But
Yeah, we did try something this year, which you may not have picked up on. So you may have picked up on it if you looked at it close enough. We added glass beads and silica sand to the paint to add kind of an abrasive finish to it. We're going to see how that works this time around, and hopefully that will address some of this concern. And we did hear this before from both council and from residents, and we're giving a few things a try, and we're going to evaluate and kind of go from there. But that's what we did this year.
great, thank you for that, Dwayne. I did not notice that. If I got out of the car or walked back to it, I probably would have, but neither situation happened. So thank you for that. The other one, I agree with Councillor O'Neill that I think the only solution at that is to, at that crosswalk, is that we put a crossing guard there for the period that covers leading up to lunch and then leading up for dinner. Otherwise, I don't think you're ever gonna stop people. You're gonna have some person push the button and go before it says walk, if you have that one. Then it's gonna say walk and no traffic is gonna go with nobody there. And then once it goes to don't walk, they're still gonna walk. So I think that's where an issue, and I think crossing guard is the answer.
Okay. There is a motion. Mr. Councillor Tower?
Thank
Sorry, just 1 second. Councillor Finney wanted.
I just want to add to the fact that we talk in our reports about the workers that we have in the town. And I just personally want to thank all of our unionized people, both inside these walls and outside, for the great work that they do. So that comes from me personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Worship. I move the council award tender number 2018-07, Main Street reconstruction, Dufferin Street to Queens Road, to the lowest bidder, Bowser Construction Limited, Sackville, New Brunswick, in the reduced amount of $1,044,000, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Tower. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Aiken.
Would you like to give any background on the reduced portion of that?
Thank you, Councillor Tower. I'd be happy to do that. We closed the bids on Thursday, July the 5th. We received 4 tender bids, which I submitted to council, I believe, Friday evening. Again, the low bid from Bowser Construction, and it was, they were all slightly over our budget. Our budget amount for this project was the $1,044,000. Having said that, we basically had to look at the project and reduce it slightly, which we thought that if this had happened, we would have to do. And what we did was we went and we just reduced the intersection. So we brought the construction, the scope of the work back, just stopping shy of the Queens Road, Main Street intersection, enough to accommodate our budget needs. And so we won't be doing the entire intersection. I still have to tie the water main in because I have to tie it in somewhere. So I will still be going out to do that. But the rest of the intersection will be left for the next phase of construction as we move through the phasing approach of Queens Road. So that cutback allowed us to meet our budget. The total projected based on the contract pricing came in at $991,275.85 HST included, which is about 52,000 under our budgeted numbers. So we're in good shape to award this contract, meet our budget with the reduction of the scope of the work, taking the intersection out.
Thank you very much. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. You have another, Councillor Todd?
I do, Your Worship. I move the council approve the purchase of the services from Crandall Engineering Limited for the field survey Crown land application and biologist workshop, all as a result of the EIA in the amount of $24,006.25, HST included.
Moved by Councillor Tower. Seconded by Councillor Mitten. Councillor Black, you were holding a question?
The $24,006.25, does that include all of the work that was, that the town of Sackville had to do under the EIA? Or is this just the pieces that we need to do and then we have to kind of wait potentially for other work to do within the EIA? So we're paying this money for this stuff now, and then if there's more that we have to deal with the EIA, there's going to be another fee for that as well? Is that correct?
Thank you, Councillor Black. You are correct. We've targeted the three of the items that are either needed to get started or has started slightly, like the field survey has to be started sometime in the first part of June, because they have to evaluate the nesting season and what birds are nesting in there. Of course, we missed the June council meeting, so that's why I have to wait to this point. So that is something that it needed to be done and is going to be done. The Crown land is again something that needs to be done as well in order to do any work whatsoever on any of the land out near the Abido, whether it be drilling for boreholes and so on. So. And the presentation, that again is something, the actual biologist presentation was something that you heard me mention at last meeting that we had held that. There is some additional work in there that would come during the public presentation part, which hasn't happened yet, so that will be coming. But these are three of the items that needed to be addressed at this time, and the other ones will have to be addressed at an appropriate time and when needed.
So we still don't entirely know exactly how phase 2 is going to roll out. So can this payment, this work be deferred until we know what's going on? I mean, I would hate to see that this happens for something that we may not actually even do. I don't know. I wouldn't want to have to spend money on something that may not happen. And also, where is this money coming from? Where is that going to fall in the budget too?
So again, these are items that are going to need to be done regardless of what happens, because any digging we do in any of the wetlands, we had to do the field survey, the bird survey. That had to be done. regardless, in order to do anything in any of the wetland areas. The money is coming out of the existing budget for this overall project, and it is funded at 75%, where the town is only cost sharing the 25%, the 50% from the federals, and the other 25 is coming from the provincial government. So the town is funding 25% only of these costs.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Aiken?
Your worship. Can you explain to me what a biologist workshop is?
What we had, what was indicated by the Department of Environment as part of the EIA was to involve biologists in the area who seem to have a lot of knowledge of what's there and how things could be, how they could contribute to the overall project. So Crandall Engineering put together a workshop of local biologists that had a lot of experience to help assist us in that process.
Okay, since we're now in kind of my wheelhouse, these field surveys and so on, is there any requirement we have to go to a company to do this? Because the reason I ask is that field surveys are, when it comes to doing ecological work, are about as boneheaded as you can get. I mean, they're really simple to do. I could drag a high school student out there to do this stuff. So I think, I realize we're kind of stuck with this now, but in the future, I think you can look at other ways of doing this, like a summer student for $6,000, $7,000 would be, I think, unless there's some provincial requirement that we do it through, quote, professionals.
You're exactly right. They did have to be qualified people, and just on that one alone, we did seek three different bids from three different companies, and we even consulted a local company, the Astor Group, which some of you may be familiar with, that work out of the Sackville area, and they were the successful bidders and company to do this survey, and at a considerable cost savings for this particular work compared to the other bids. So we did look at that.
Mr. Beal?
Yeah, just to expand as well, these will be, these are not payments that are going directly to Crandall. These are sub-consultants of Crandall. So basically Crandall's just paying the invoice. There is no additional markup on those as well. So it's just, it then goes to the third-party group. Further to Councillor Black's question though as well on the finances, we submitted an infrastructure application. The infrastructure application originally had no as a checkbox under an EIA. Subsequent to that, we were then directed that we were required to have an EIA for any funding we get as a result of the infrastructure program. So when the EIA was completed, it directed us to do these items. So if we don't do these items, then we give up the infrastructure funding. So that's as well kind of the financial impact of that, because the EIA is a requirement under infrastructure, and therefore these things were required under the EIA to have it completed and approved.
Okay, thank you. That drives it home. Okay, any other questions? Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Tower. We are on item F. Councillor Butcher?
Thank you. So the report on recreation programs and events starts on page 35. We met on June 25th. There's a full schedule of the summer programs and events available at sackville.com. And although registration is full for many of our programs, there are still some spaces available. Hundreds of residents came out to our Canada Day celebrations on July 1st. The band was a big hit, and the family of George Stanley was on hand to celebrate the new sculpture installation on Main Street. The Sackville Sports Wall of Fame induction ceremony took place on June 14th to a packed house. Congratulations once again to our 3 inductees, Steve Ridlington, Earl Thompson, and Heather Smith. Our 3rd annual Volunteer Recognition Night was held June 28th, and the following individuals were recognized in the private event. Gloria and Nelson Estabrook for a Long-Term Service Award, Cy Bernard, a Long-Term Service Award, Kathy Pooley, a Long-Term Service Award, Audrey Hicks, a Golden Long-Term Service Award, and Kimberly Cadman was the Titan Community Achievement Award. The 4th annual Beach Hill Park Challenge obstacle course race will be held on the 21st of this month, and we'll have a newly designed 4-kilometer course and a new kids race course as well, and you can register in advance at sackville.com. 10 new volunteers and 5 summer staff have been trained for the Cycling Without Age bicycle. Rides were provided during Canada Day, and individuals can book future rides by contacting Town Hall. The New Brunswick Day celebrations are scheduled from noon till 3 on August 6th. There will be live music presented by Tipsy 3 and the Carter Girls, and there will be plenty of children's activities, including the annual Family Cup and the always popular dunk tank. Staff is pleased to host the Wild Wonder Forest School at Beach Hill Park 3 days per week over the summer months, and there will be a motion coming forward to approve a formal arrangement to have Beach Hill as a permanent home for the Wild Wonder. Friday night antique car cruise will be held on Main Street on the evening of July 27th, and the event will include live music and dozens of antique cars. The library report, the summer reading club and programs are underway. Summer students took part in the annual Salem Summer Send-Off, and they visited various classes at Salem School and held a kickoff party during the Farmers Market on June 23rd. And so far, over 65 children have registered for the Summer Reading Club. And in early June, the library had a visit from the Salem Junior Librarian Group, who came and performed various library tasks for a morning. And that's my report.
Questions on the report? Hearing none, I believe, Councillor Black, please.
It's not really a question. I just want to say that I'm kind of an old hand at the dunk tank now. So if the rec department needs anybody to sit in and the dunk tank, I would certainly volunteer.
Write that down. All right. All right. Do we need a motion to put him up for that? Yeah. Councillor Butcher, you have some motion?
I do. I move that council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign and seal a usage agreement with Wild Wonder Incorporated for property identified as property account number 0218064 Beach Hill Road for a 5-year term beginning on August 1st, 2018 and expiring on August 1st, 2023 as provided.
Moved by Councillor Butcher, seconded by Councillor Tower. Would you like perhaps to remind of context a little bit, Mr. Pride?
Sure. Thank you, Your Worship. This is a 5-year agreement that the Wild Wonder Inc. is looking to enter in with the town to use Beach Hill Park and install a yurt and a composting toilet system up there to offer their outdoor-based recreational programs to children.
And a mutual 60-day notice, I think, to...
Yeah, there's a 60-day out clause in the agreement for both sides. And yeah, there were several other pieces to it that I reviewed at the discussion group meeting.
Okay. Councillor Evans?
Yeah, I just wanted to take this another opportunity to commend staff. There were questions raised at the discussion meeting about the nature of the tent and the program and who could access it and stuff. And we got a very comprehensive and really good response. And I just want to say thank you for that. It's a real treat when you make decisions and you have complete information and it's compelling. So thank you for that.
And just some of the questions that were resolved, maybe you could just mention the topics, Mr. Councillor Evans?
Well, or Councillor Finney can do it because I think they were his questions, but one had to do with accessibility. This could be an expensive program, and how about people who don't have money? And they talked about the arrangements they have with a group in town that helps subsidize it, but they also offer some But they said, like, they do it for free. They also have some volunteers helping out. They have grandparents doing it, and as a new grandparent, I like to sing the praises of grandparents everywhere. And the other part had to do, I think, with the safety of the yurt, which is a tent made of cloth. And we got a really good answer to this. I mean, it's, when you first of all think about a fire inside a tent, you think that's a risky business. And part of the answer was firefighters and race car drivers wear this kind of material to protect themselves from fire. So that was pretty impressive. So the whole point was questions were asked, you know, reasonable questions were asked, and we got really compelling answers. And I just think that's worthy of praise.
Thank you. Councillor Mitten.
Thank you. Well, I guess I was going to say something similar to thank staff and the folks who run Wild Wonder for providing us with detailed answers. Yeah, the yurt, composting toilet, and how it's financially accessible. They even have bursaries to allow more people in the community to be able to participate. So I think this is a wonderful addition to our community, and I am speaking in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Butcher?
Thank you. I move that council declare surplus the special event tent and authorize its disposal to Commercial Tent Limited in the amount of $1,500 plus HST.
Moved by Councillor Butcher, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Any question? Question. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Public safety. Councillor O'Neill, you start.
So this is the fire department on page 38. Sackville Fire and Rescue responded to 11 calls for service during the month of June. 5 motor vehicle collisions, 3 rubbish fires, 2 commercial fire alarms, and 1 residential electrical fire. They continue to train, hold their training sessions during the month with self-contained breathing apparatus, pump operations, water shuttle with the Point of Butte Fire Department, and a whole lot of other little things that keep them busy but keep them up to date. I'm sure that the fire department are anxious for people to start really thinking about their tickets for their 13th annual truck draw. Seems like everybody waits pretty well to the end and they're holding their breath whether they're going to sell enough. So it'd be nice if we get them ahead of time. Also a reminder, the chief wants us to remember that rubbish fires are strictly prohibited within town limits. And he also always reminds the residents of Sackville to make sure that they have a basic emergency kit prepared for that would last 72 hours. That's all I have. If there's any questions, I'm sure the chief would be glad to answer them.
Councillor Evans?
Not a question, but a comment. The number one thing that required a response was motor vehicle collisions, 5 of 11. And I'm guessing most of those were out on the highway. And so this, we have a motion that we're going to try to get UMNB to pass, and it has to do with the compensation we get for doing this sort of thing. So the local taxpayers pay to support our fire department, and our fire department responds to calls in town, and that makes sense. But we also have an obligation, which is, I think, forced on us by the province to do stuff outside our bailiwick, and we do this and we are not being compensated appropriately. We are subsidizing the province or the people who live outside of Sackville, and this just illustrates why we need to try to do something about this.
Thank you for that, Councillor Evans. Any other questions? No? We'll move to police.
The police service report is on page 39 to 41 in the package. As with last month, the overall number of calls for service is slightly lower than this time last year. It should be noted that there was an increase in calls for property crime due to what the RCMP identify as a prolific offender living in the area. He has been charged with a break-and-enter and theft and is being curfew monitored daily as a condition of his release. The RCMP conducted 5 check stops, 5 foot patrols, and wrote 10 tickets in Sackville. Members are also keeping a close eye on Bill Johnstone Park due to a variety of mischief-related activity and/or suspicious behavior. As part of a community consultation exercise, Sergeant Gagner and our CPO, Jean-Francois Leblanc, had a table set up at the farmers market on June 16th. They had a good turnout for community engagement and addressed such issues as legalization of cannabis and sexual predation at Mount Allison University. They were able to particularly highlight some of the CPO's duties to constituents. The CPO report is found on page 40 and 41. And as always, we are fortunate to have such a busy and community-minded representative as JF. Some highlights for the month include our CPO attending the SafeGrad overnight event at Tenchmar High, attending the grade 8 year-end event at Marshview Middle School, issuing 10 positive tickets this month, which is, I think, the highest we've ever had. Positive tickets are issued when a youth exhibits particularly positive behavior in our town, and they're given out to inspire that type of behavior in kids. Organizing the Cops and Kids leadership camps, getting the bicycle registration up and running, as well as being involved in his numerous committees and community functions. It should be mentioned that JF will be looking to recruit new volunteers in the coming months for the RCMP auxiliary program in the Sackville area, so keep an eye out for that. That's my report.
Questions on that? No. Reminder that we'll be hosting the municipal police contract holders later in August, and the role of the community policing officer is an item that we intend to bring to that session. So no motions? Correct? Okay. Thank you very much, councillors. We move on to H, policy bylaw. Councillor Evans, welcome back.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, this is my swan song, so thank you, Councillor Black. Policy Bylaw Liaison Group met on Thursday, June 28, 2018. Staff continue to work on housekeeping items for Bylaw 262, a bylaw to regulate street traffic. After this bylaw received first reading at the regular council meeting, June 11th. Staff noted they are working on a town Sackville policing bylaw, which is now a requirement under the Local Governance Act. Once all appropriate staff have had an opportunity to review the draft bylaw, it will be presented to Policy Bylaw Liaison Group and then to Council. The Clerk's office also noted they officiated 2 tender openings, which have already been noted under Public Property and Facilities. The Clerk's office also continues to draft an operating procedure for the maintenance of personal information as a follow-up to training sessions when staff attended the protection of privacy part about RTIPA training. RTIPA, by the way, Right to Information Protection of Privacy Act. The Clerk's office also attended an RTIPA session in Fredericton as a result of changes to the Act on April 1st. No joke. Clerk's office is in the early stages of drafting a substance abuse policy and have attended an information session on cannabis, as well as made a call out to other municipalities who might already have a policy of this nature in place.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Any questions on the report? If not, we have some motions.
A couple of motions. Okay. I move that Council gives second reading section by section to bylaw number 262, a bylaw to regulate street traffic. Bylaw 262. Section 1, interpretation. Section 2, stop signs and yield signs. Section 3, lane highways. Section 4, one-way highways. Section 5, traffic control signals. Section 6, non-vehicular traffic. Section 7, speed. Section 8, parking. Section 9, procession. Section 10, other restrictions. Section 11, penalties. Section 12, other. Section 13, repeal.
Moved by Councillor Evans. Seconded by Councillor Black.
I think there, correct me if I'm wrong, this is essentially a housekeeping change in the addition of a few sort of corrections. Were there any changes between first reading and this one? Wasn't there something that we had to correct? Perhaps if it's not inappropriate, I could get the clerk to speak to this, because I've forgotten.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Yes, there was one minor change with regard to the parking in front of the post office. It was listed in 2 separate sections of our street traffic bylaw, so we just made that housekeeping change to be consistent of what the bylaw should say.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Worship. I'll be voting in favor of this, but I'm still somewhat disappointed that there's no, that the laneways, Ford Lane, Little Lane, those, still have a 40K limit on them, which there's no, I mean, we've done nothing to slow people down going down there. And I did a little personal experiment a couple days ago, went around the block on Ford Lane. And when you're driving through Ford Lane, 10 kilometers an hour still seems a bit fast. Okay, so it's just so, and I didn't even try Willow Lane. So I would encourage people to, or staff to, keep an eye on this, and if, with a view to, at some point, and hopefully not too distant future, actually post a lower speed limit on those few roadways.
Any other comments? This is brought forward from discussion. We gave back feedback. It went back to the committee, so it's been in our hands for several meetings now. Question? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? Motion is carried.
I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 262, a bylaw to regulate street traffic. He went too soon.
It went early.
Maybe it's because he didn't get his way. No.
Moved by
Premature excitation.
moved by Councillor Evans. Moved by Councillor Evans.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay. Let the record show Deputy Mayor Aiken left the room for this section.
I move that council give second reading, section by section, to bylaw number 249A, a bylaw to repeal bylaw 249, Town of Sackville Municipal Heritage Conservation Area bylaw. Council of the Town of Sackville, under the authority vested in it by the Local Governance Act, RSNB 2017, Chapter 18, and amendments thereto, enacts as follow. 1. Bylaw number 249, Town of Sackville Municipal Heritage Conservation Area bylaw is hereby repealed.
Moved by Councillor Evans. Seconded by Councillor Tower. Floor is open for debate. Councillor Mitten.
Could we ask Mr. Burke to provide us some background on how we got to where we are, please?
Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Councillor Mitten. I'll try to be succinct here. We've been at this a long time, and it really it started in December of 2017 when we had several members on the board whose terms were expiring, and at that point in time we had a discussion with council to discuss not just reappointments but to really undertake a more formal review of the Heritage Board in general in terms of the number of permits that were issued, where we were with procedural, administrative type documentations, and discuss future appointments to the board. So as a result of, I guess, that conversation and subsequent review, it was determined that the bylaw wasn't overly effective, I guess, to summarize it. And I guess specifically that it was shallow in its attempt to regulate heritage when compared to other communities, City of Moncton, City of Fredericton, City of St. John as examples, in terms of how it's approach to heritage. But that was deliberate. When the bylaw was reviewed in 2016, there was a conscious effort made that there wasn't a will within the community to take a further dive into the way we regulate heritage in the community, and this stemmed largely from the demolition of the United Church, which I certainly won't get into tonight. So I guess one of the things that we looked at were, I guess it was determined that the bylaw was indeed shallow, and then one of the things that we looked at were, are there other ways to regulate heritage other than through the heritage bylaw maybe, or through another means other than heritage board? So we spent several weeks working with planning at the Southeast Regional Service Commission, as well as our legal team, to review what options may exist under the Community Planning Act. And we explored those. As you know, there's a new Community Planning Act that was proclaimed in January, it came into effect January of this year. And I guess to make a long story short, there wasn't an option to regulate heritage under the Community Planning Act. And the reason being is that there is an existing piece of legislation in the province of New Brunswick that allows municipalities to regulate heritage, and that's the Heritage Conservation Act. The Community Planning Act allows you to make and draw attention to the importance of heritage in your community, which would then allude to a potential regulatory environment under the Community Planning Act. But it certainly doesn't allow you to take those powers from another piece of legislation and regulate it under the Community Planning Act, unfortunately. And I guess one of the reasons why we initially set out to do that was because, you know, as Ms. Bickford sits here on a monthly basis and provides us with updates, is that they have a planning review and adjustment committee who regularly review planning applications. So there's some experience and professionalism with the way they evaluate those applications on a monthly and quarterly basis. But I guess one of the bigger stumbling blocks, perhaps the biggest stumbling block for us right out of the gate, was that the Community Planning Act also doesn't allow you to regulate or prevent the demolition of buildings. The Heritage Conservation Act allows you to prohibit or provide a further mechanism for how buildings can be demolished in the heritage conservation areas. But within the Community Planning Act itself, there's no authority or power to further regulate the demolition of buildings. And I think that would be a shortfall. So if we were to somehow try and regulate heritage under the Community Planning Act, we'd have to be open and transparent and say that demolition, there's no protection under that framework. So this isn't a topic that we're just getting started on talking about. We've been talking about this since December. I've reported on it on a monthly basis from December. So in those council reports, it indicated that council was undertaking a further review with respect to administrative procedures, the bylaw, permitting, future appointments, et cetera. I think that's important. So I guess things kind of came to a head in May when we kind of wrapped up our internal review of what the options were. And at that point, we provided council with information that if council so choose, there could be an option there to formally repeal the heritage bylaw. At that point in time, council set a public hearing, which we held last month at a regular meeting in June. And that was really an opportunity to hear from the public, to see what the will is of the community. And as we heard, there were 2 letters suggesting the council not repeal the bylaw. Was 1 letter suggesting that you do repeal it. And then, perhaps coincidentally, we did have another development type application on the agenda. We did have a large showing at the public hearing, and we also had, don't have the tally right here in front of me, but somewhat almost equal points about those in favor and those against repealing the document in general. So I know there's certainly been some discussion about where do we go from here, or what's next, or what are the future options. And I think what we've advised is that we may be better served if we focus our attention to the way in which we can provide support. Right now, it's through a modest amount of financial support to property owners who have properties within those 2 special heritage conservation areas, to allow them to help support them, make improvements to upkeep and maintain their properties. So that's certainly one area as we enter into the 2019 budget season, where we can have that conversation about what options may be available to us to further enhance that incentive program. But the other point I want to make is that there's still a regulatory environment in place. We do have a zoning bylaw which regulates the use and development of land in Sackville. There will not be any protection against the demolition of properties. But in saying that, I also want to note that the existing heritage bylaw allows the demolition of buildings. There's a process that a developer has to go through. You post it for sale. In the event that nobody moves the building, you have to present a salvage plan, and after that, the owner's free to demolish the building. So there will be that removal in the demolition stages of buildings that will no longer be included. So we support organizations in our community who have a strong support and volunteer base for heritage conservation, and we'll continue to explore ways in which we can find ways to partner and enhance and support them going forward. And the community development, the community grant, the heritage grant program is one area that we would be looking to, take a next crack at revising and strengthening, with specific reference to the appearance and maintenance of properties that we deem to be worthy of support. So, Your Worship, that would be the extent of my background, but I'd be happy to elaborate if anyone has another point they want covered.
Okay. Councillor Evans?
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Burke for that. I've had the pleasure of working with him on this issue for some time, and it's, like I say, it's been a pleasure. Like Councillor Black last month, I'm warning you, I'm about to probably use my 10 minutes. This is an issue that has been, well, I've agonized with for a long time. And I have spent hundreds of hours on this issue at Heritage Board meetings, both before and after my appointment, at meetings during the redrafting of the bylaw in 2016, at council meetings, at meetings with staff, at meetings with lawyers, in court, before appeal boards, reading legislation, and speaking with citizens and current and former Heritage Board members. It hasn't been easy, and I've learned more than I ever wanted to know about heritage. I've also listened to public input since it was announced in May that we were considering repealing the bylaw. Some people feel that if we don't act on their recommendations, then we haven't listened to them. But I can assure you and them that that is not the case. I have considered all the input, and while I may disagree with some of it, I'm going to try to explain my reasons. There are two big aspects to this question. The first is, what is heritage and what are we trying to do about it? And secondly, what is the right balance between public interest and private property? Cambridge Dictionary defines heritage as features, in our case buildings, belonging to the culture of a particular society that were created in the past and still have historical importance. When we say that we want to protect our heritage, most would agree that that's a laudable goal, because it seems right that we protect things from attack or active threats. We might even agree with preserving our heritage because that implies protection from deterioration or decay, a passive threat. In principle, most people would support these, but in practice, it is not clear what it involves. Does it apply to all buildings that exist now? Or do they have to be old? Is it every old building? It's interesting to me that none of the buildings that people want to preserve now were originally old. They were brand new when they were constructed, and people weren't thinking about heritage when they were built. They were modern in their day, and they all replaced something. Other buildings, forests, or green spaces. People have always been changing things, and for probably just as long, other people have been resisting that change. One thing I've learned over the years is that people tend to support change when they initiate it, but resist it when it's thrust upon them. Or put another way, we all want things to stay the same unless I want to change them. And people are different. They have different values, tastes, and ideas, but one of our shared values is the notion of private property. While we certainly do have shared or public property, each of us takes it as a right that we can own property and do with it pretty much as we please. I can buy land, build a house, 1 story or 2, 1 bedroom or many. I can decide how many windows or doors to have and where they are, whether there's a porch, what color the house is. And similarly, if I live in an existing home, I would expect that it would be up to me and my family whether or how we would maintain or renovate it, because that's the way it's been since long before the town was founded. Over the years, some regulations have been established which impose some restrictions on what people can do with their property, primarily in the form of building codes. But there are very few, because none of us likes to be told what we can or cannot do with our own stuff. One could say that the reason the heritage bylaw doesn't have teeth was because there wasn't general support for biting. I think that we all want things to look nice, but as I said earlier, people are different. and our ideas of what looks nice differ. It becomes a real challenge when we're talking about my opinion about what your property looks like. Recently, my neighbors had their roof replaced and now it's blue. They didn't ask me. Should they have? Should we have regulations in place that dictate to property owners what they may or must do to their property? How would we feel about that legislation if it applied to us? This is an issue that has come up recently in other contexts, but while I would welcome having a debate on this topic, we haven't had it, and as a result, we don't have much, if any, legislation on this contentious issue. Now, some time ago, a small group of people lobbied the town in an effort to preserve heritage, and this eventually led to the establishment of a heritage board and the enacting of a heritage conservation area bylaw. Though done with the best intentions, because it was never really clear what exactly we had agreed that we were trying to preserve, nor had we produced legislation with real teeth in it, it didn't work out as intended. It became a hugely contentious issue on which there is little agreement except for one thing. Almost everyone I've heard from agrees that what we currently have is not working. While acknowledging that there are a significant number of citizens who don't think that heritage is an important issue, there are two groups who do have strong opinions on the heritage bylaw. And their opinions can be summarized like this. On the one hand, you have those who think the existing bylaw needs to be strengthened because it's too weak and doesn't preserve heritage enough. For example, neither it nor its predecessor prevented the demolition of buildings some people wanted saved. And on the other hand, you have those who feel that the bylaw goes too far and places a burden on property owners, and that the town is interfering where it doesn't belong, and the bylaw has been nothing but trouble and should be repealed. Unlike something like the street traffic bylaw, which, though we have discussed tweaking it recently, is in large part otherwise fine. In the case of the heritage bylaw, the status quo is not an option. We have been in violation of the Heritage Conservation Act for almost 6 months. We have only 3 of the minimum 5 required members. But even when we had the requisite number of members, we have not issued any permits in over a year, and there isn't agreement on the part of the board or council what the Heritage Conservation Act and bylaw mean precisely, nor what the role and relationship of an independent heritage board should be. I have spoken with people who would like to strengthen the bylaw, who agree that if that can't be done, then repealing it is preferable to the status quo. Part of the problems we have experienced come from the Act itself, partly from our bylaw, partly from our unfamiliarity with an independent board, but it also came from our experiences surrounding the demolition of the former United Church. This difficult experience exposed these weaknesses that I mentioned, but those weaknesses were there all along. Given the realities of our past experiences and our current circumstances, I don't believe that there is a consensus on what the right way to fix this dysfunction is. It didn't have to work out this way, but it did, and the current situation is not satisfactory to anyone. Our experience has been hugely divisive. It has also been extremely expensive, and yet it has not succeeded in doing what those who supported it had hoped. In fact, it has caused hardship for some property owners in the heritage zones. I think that this is one of those situations where if we can't agree on how to do something, the best or least bad thing to do is stop doing it. This doesn't mean that we don't care. It just means that what we have now isn't working for us. I hope that you understand why I've come to these conclusions. If you don't understand, perhaps you can trust me that although this is not what I want, given what I know, I believe it is the right thing to do. But if you can't do either, understand or trust me, then we will just have to accept the fact that we disagree. But rest assured, this is not a decision I have taken lightly. This comes 2 months after the public was apprised of the possibility of repeal, and I've considered what I've heard from those who have reached out. It also comes after many hours of agonizing reflection. However, just because this decision makes me sad, it doesn't mean I think it's the wrong one. The Sackville we know and love and want to preserve is the result of generations of people making their individual changes. This bylaw is relatively new. It's less than 8 years old. Sackville survived without this bylaw until October 2010, and it's important to remember the existence of the bylaw didn't prevent the demolitions that so galvanized a segment of our population. My experience is that buildings get torn down only because there's no practical way for the owner to maintain them. It's sad, but like any timely death, inevitable and not wrong. Most owners want to maintain their property in an attractive manner if they can afford to. If this bylaw is repealed, I expect that the streetscape of Sackville will continue to evolve as it has for 150 years, and while not everyone will like everything, Sackville will continue to be the vibrant, attractive town that we call home. I speak in favor of the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Mitten, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whether one is for or against repealing the heritage bylaw, it seems to me, as Councillor Evans stated, that pretty much everyone agrees the status quo isn't working and that something needs to change. There will be a gap if the heritage bylaw is repealed, and that does concern me. I don't like that there won't be anything in place for a certain amount of time. And many would argue that there are already many gaps in the current bylaw and it's not doing its job, and I would agree. There have been significant expenses to the town, and there have been expenses to property owners, which have been identified as problematic and inconvenient for the homeowners and property owners. There have also been issues with the bylaw that's been seen as too weak. Ultimately, the bylaw has not really done what it was intended to do. Ultimately, it's not an easy decision to come to. I am going to vote to repeal the bylaw, even though I'm not satisfied with the solution. I do wish we could have found a way to change it and address many of the concerns raised. It may be that the will of council is to repeal the bylaw, and if this is the case, my understanding is that staff will immediately work on new grant criteria and report back to council. I sincerely hope that moving forward, if we're using planning mechanisms and a reformed grant program, that it will be more effective than what is happening currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitten. Any other, Councillor Tower?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Evans. Fantastic job. I'll give you 10 minutes. I'll give you 9 of my 10 minutes with that kind of an explanation, and I agree with so much that you said. It was amazing. Personally, I was against the whole thing back when I heard from David Jones, and they made him put a garage on the side of his house and not facing the front. So when I inquired about why it would be so ridiculous, he built a beautiful house, why that? Well, it's the only house that would have a garage in the front facing the road. They didn't do that way back when, so why would we allow it now? And it cost him a heck of a lot of money. And then there was a company a small business that wanted to change the door on their building. And they want to put a storm door in so they could protect it from the heat loss. No, it has to be a wooden door. Unless, of course, you turn and put the door on the side so you can't see it from the road. Another one, you can't put that doorknob on there. It's not the right kind. It has to be a brass turn knob on there. You know, when I saw these things happening, I thought, you know, I don't think that's what the spirit of the heritage is all about, when you force people to put extra money out. So I was hoping during the next few years that the whole act would have been cleaned up and they would stop doing some of these things. But I've had enough people tell me that unless you're going to force them to do everything to fix up to the way it used to be way back then you have no teeth. Get rid of it. I even have friends of mine that have a beautiful old 150-year-old house. They put major dollars into it to fix it up because they wanted it to look good like it used to. But they also thought, well, you know, this isn't for everybody, and I don't think that what our idea going forward is not working, so they thought we should get rid of it too. I've had a lot of people come in the store. If I went to McDonald's, I would get inundated. If I went into the Yig downtown, the same thing. You know, people would ask, why are you protecting that board? you know, and I don't have an answer for why we want to protect it, because I decided long ago they weren't doing anything to make me support it. So with the number of people telling me that it's not working, either fix it or get rid of it, and I support the idea of getting rid of it.
Thank you, Councillor Tower. Any other councillor like to weigh in? Question? All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
I move that I move that council give third and final reading to bylaw number 249A, a bylaw to repeal bylaw 249, Town of Sackville Municipal Heritage Conservation Area bylaw.
Moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Tower.
Question?
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Tower. Councillor Evans, I mean. You have?
One more motion.
Yep.
I move that the Town of Sackville Heritage Board is hereby dissolved.
Moved by Councillor Evans, seconded by Councillor Tower. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Move to item I, personnel. We'll just wait a moment for Deputy Mayor. O'Neill, Councillor O'Neill or Councillor Evans?
There we go. Okay. Liaison Council meeting was held on July 5th, 2018. As of the last pay period, there were 36 permanent employees and 20 summer students. An arbitration hearing was held in early June on 2 grievances relating to job posting and contracting out provisions of the collective agreement. The arbitrator dismissed the 2 grievances and concluded there was no evidence to support the union grievances. The arena attendant positions were posted internally during the past month. However, no applications were received. This past month, we received a letter of resignation, as already been mentioned, of our bylaws officer, Brian Bell, advising us he'd accept new employment opportunity. His last day of employment with the town will be July 20th. Mr. Bell has been bylaw officer, enforcement officer for the town for approximately 3 years, and we wish him well in his future endeavors.
Questions on personnel? Hearing none. No motions. Thank you, Councillor Evans.
When do we do the UND stuff? Thank you.
Strategic Development. Councillor Mitten, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the report begins on page 77. Our committee was unable to meet in June due to scheduling conflicts, but I have a few highlights to report. We were very pleased to welcome the first Shad Mount Allison program to Town Hall, as the Mayor also already mentioned. Shad is a Canada-wide nonprofit enrichment program for outstanding high school students, which aims to empower Canada's next generation of change makers. This is the first time the program has come to Mount Allison, and we're very excited to have the students in Sackville for the entire month of July. And the town will be involved in several Shad projects during their stay. The New Brunswick Department of Transportation and Infrastructure have now commenced the replacement of the overhead sign structures at exit 504 and 506. They may have even finished now. And the work now shows a reference to Bridge Street replaced with Sackville Centre in 4 locations. Staff are working with Tantramar High School student Ambra Kaur to analyze the results of the town's annual residence survey that was issued in March. The results are being assembled in a report card type infographic to help communicate the results with citizens. And we've already mentioned that Wind E-Bikes is going to be operating bicycle rental and retail accessories business from the VIC, and that Mayor Hyam, Deputy Mayor Aiken, and I were there when the guides planted some trees down by the ball field with the help of Riverview Lawn and Garden Landscaping. So thank you again to the guides for their contribution to our community. And I don't have any motions.
Any questions on the Strategic Committee report? Hearing none, we move to item 10, new business. Deputy Mayor, do you want to start on FCM reports?
Okay. Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Minton, Mayor Hyam and I attended the FCM in the beginning of June. We sort of divided up the workshops to cover as much as we could. I'm going to report on the 3 or 4 I went to. The first one was called Technology in the Future of Public Engagement, and it was mainly an effort to sort of outline coming technology. And I thought, my personal opinion of this was they're getting a little ahead of themselves. They're talking about, we're on the sort of 5th or 6th iteration of the internet, and they were talking about the 8th or 9th. But so it was just very general discussion, and a bit of a theme. It was put on by Rogers. The local tools for national climate outcomes was mostly to talk about the funding that was available, and the upshot of that was the green funds are available in water quality, adaptation to existing infrastructure, and the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. The other one I went to that I can report on was about concrete and asphalt and roads. I think I drew the short straw that day. They outlined that the federal government's, sorry, Dwayne, all the projects they're funding now have this sort of climate adaptation lens to them, and they were talking about the sort of costs and so on, and the life cycle of a road, concrete or asphalt. And they talked about initial costs, the operations, the main maintenance and finally decommissioning of it. And the conclusion that almost everyone there drew was that concrete was better to use than asphalt. It's less energy to build, less bases required, and it's a local product. And they said it would save 12,000 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per kilometer. And this workshop was put on by the Cement Association of Canada. And finally, less formally, and maybe Councillor Minton can expand on this, we sort of, I guess, mugged a couple of the people from FCM to talk about the fact our proposal for the quarry got turned down. And upshot of that is that we're having a teleconference with them next week. And finally, an overall impression, this was, I didn't think, one of the better FCMs that we've had. It was, I don't think any of us went on a study tour because it just didn't seem to be much relevant. And just physically, the rooms were just too small to accommodate the crowds. Several things I tried to get into, I couldn't simply because the volume of people in there. So it wasn't, to me, it wasn't one of the best ones.
Just in context, it was the largest attended conference ever, and it was in the new convention center in Halifax, but the main room took everybody, but the rooms they were holding sessions in were always full. So Councillor Minton?
Thank you. So thank you for the opportunity to attend FCM this year. There was a very full schedule. As mentioned by Deputy Mayor Aitken, we tried to divide up and attend as many workshops and other programming as possible, such as the keynote addresses from the National Liberal, Conservative, NDP, and Green leaders. It was great to see the impact FCM can have at the federal level, and there were resolutions adopted at the conference by FCM, for example, calling for a plan to address marine litter, and plastic, and looking for policy tools for addressing rural challenges that will be taken to the national level. Some of the highlights for me, the President's Forum talked about new faces of leadership. So 28% of municipal councillors are women, and actually Sackville's above average. And they were talking about how, according to the UN, you need to hit a threshold of at least 30% women on a council or on a committee or anything like that, where in order for women's voices and input to really be heard and for them to be able to make meaningful contributions. And this is certainly not meant to pick on any specific elected officials. It's meant for us to look at the big picture in our country. So as I said, Sackville's above average in terms of women. And there are other voices that we need to consider to ensure that are heard, including Indigenous, LGBTQ+, visible minorities, people with disabilities, and youth. And someone mentioned on our current trajectory towards gender equality in our society, it will be another 217 years before there's parity, before there's equality. That's a bit too long. There were in-depth discussions about the need to also address reconciliation. Dr. Pam Palmater offered advice on how to do so, developing relationships government to government. And this is an area Sackville definitely needs to address and improve. I attended a workshop on tools for Indigenous municipal collaboration and plan to explore what possibilities exist for our municipality. And this connects to another workshop I went to called Achieving a More Inclusive Canada, where there's a tool called Gender-Based Analysis Plus. And as we look at policy decisions, frankly, all of our decisions, it's a lens to use to consider all the people that might be impacted by our decisions and all the different stakeholders. So tonight, for example, councillors have been expressing support for the public symbolic support of the LGBTQ+ community with the rainbow crosswalks. But in addition to this type of support, using the gender-based analysis plus would help us look at the other types of policies that might impact that community or other communities. So there is a free introductory training online through Status of Women Canada, and I'd like to explore how staff or council might utilize this. In Edmonton, there was a city councillor who spoke, and she talked about how they used this framework to address the issue of safety on public transit in their city, and they have actually now made it mandatory for everyone on city council to do this short training within a year of being elected. I also attended a youth forum. It was really useful to hear how other municipalities are dealing with issues relating to youth. Sackville does not have the same size and resources as bigger cities, but some of the ideas were intriguing. For example, Montreal City Councillor spoke about how they have a youth file and they actually have a youth committee that's consulted about all their policies. I know there's always room for improvement, but I felt from hearing the suggestions that Sackville actually is above average in this case. For example, I know with the recreation plan that staff did go to the youth and ask for input directly and engage them. And so I thought that was great. And one thing to remember is that youth care about a lot of issues, not just youth issues. And I think Deputy Mayor Aitken made us sound maybe more aggressive than we were, but I was going to mention that we attended the infrastructure workshop with Minister Sohi, and we did end up speaking with someone from FCM, and so we'll be following up again with that on the quarry project. So thank you for listening to me. I know it's getting late, but I wanted to share all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bitton. I too was there, but attended some of the same ones that you've heard about, so I will focus on a couple of items. One was that I didn't have a set time to meet the CNVP, as a matter of fact, so I spent a lot of time making myself, imposing myself on the people around the CN booth to remind them that they owed me some time. The mayor of Amherst and myself were invited to start off the session by doing a video at Municipal World, which was on our website afterward. And that was fascinating. The other ones you may be seeing right now, they did them throughout the FCM, but there was one from Riverview, there's been, I think, one from Truro, and there were a few other topics that were done, which were quite an enlightening way to get through a topic in about a minute and a half. The other was, I met Alderman from Truro, who was in the middle of doing many of the same things that we were doing. They were about to replace an Avido, and were really concerned over how that was going to go and what the cost would end up being, and what how they could do that amongst the tides. They also had several of the same topics that we were dealing with, and so we had very good exchanges on how they were handling things and how we were. I attended one on forestry, which also was sponsored by a forestry industry association, so it was a bit frustrating to sit through a few of the presentations, and it made you wonder about some of the data that was being presented. Perhaps the two things that really struck me was Saskatoon mayor is a very strong individual, very good leader, and that person spoke about the relationship with First Nations that are created urban reserves within the Saskatoon town. So they are actually separate Indian reserves, but they're surrounded by the town. And the way in which they work together to turn those both into assets for all of them, so that they became basically Greater Saskatoon for economic and business development purposes. And it was very, from both sides, two First Nations and the town, they thought it had worked extraordinarily well, and they were doing much better than they had anticipated they would do. So he gave a very good talk about that. Finally, I also attended the affordable housing, and there were a lot of ideas, many of which mean that a municipality or a city has to choose which role it wants to pursue. And some of them became landlords. They literally were building rental properties and running them and collecting rent and maintaining them, while others would adopt that this isn't an appropriate role for local government. We need to use levers to create incentives for others to do that. So you had examples of direct hands-on to simply using levers in a way that would allow others to act. And it was very interesting because I met the two ladies from the Calgary Housing Authority outside, and we had an extended talk outside about, because they were mixing the roles. They were doing low-income housing, but they were also doing the incentives for private sector and other activities to take place. So in Calgary, they were doing both. The key to all of this was the announcement of the federal affordable housing strategy, which allows some of the funds they give you priorities, but they will allow funds now to flow to municipal entities, which is why all of these places were making choices about how they might impact the housing field. So it was really good. Lots of precedents set by larger places. Not a lot of small town environments were represented in that. And I found that in most of the sessions. Most of them were the larger towns that were talking. Even in the rural plenary, they were kind of in the middle of all that, right? The rural plenary was about 400 people north of 60 and what issues that has versus us. And I find us always taking little pieces from parts to think, well, that might work in another way. And so, but overall, I was somewhat disappointed in the overall content for this year, similar to Deputy Mayor, I would think. So any questions on our experiences? Councillor O'Neill?
I really don't have any questions, but some of you may remember that I was voted to go to Halifax, and I decided that I changed my mind and said, asked them to remove my name, for the simple reason that I find that the most enjoyable part for me is the study tours, and by the time we decide who's going, you don't stand a hope in ever getting onto a study tour. So we generally don't nominate who's going until later on in the spring. We know where the convention's going to be. We pretty well know who's planning on it, which is Quebec, I believe, in the spring next year. We pretty well know the councillors that have asked to go or we think are going to go. And I would suggest that those names be brought forward and voted on before the end of the year, which would allow us to have the names and be ready just as soon as the information comes out on that, so that maybe we can luck in and get in onto the study tours. To tell me I go to Halifax and maybe stand in line in case so-and-so doesn't show up and I might be able to get on to the bus or the tour, I just lost interest, so. And then what was supposed to be 3 nights ended up, if you wanted to go to the final closing, which they call the gala evening, that was another night. So anyway, I kind of thought it was kind of not organized the way it should have been or something. So anyway, I opted to stay home instead of going down, but it sounds like our councillors did bring back some good information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. No questions on our experiences. We will move to the next item, which is UMNB attendees and resolution. We have discussed this a couple of times, and there is nobody assigned to, or no area assigned to this resolution, so if anybody wishes to make that, the floor is open for that. Deputy Mayor Aiken moves.
I move that council authorize the following people to attend the Union of Municipalities of New Brunswick Conference in Fredericton, New Brunswick from September 28th, 2018 to September 30th, 2018, and report back to council. Mayor John Hyam, councillors Bruce Finney, Alison Butcher, Andrew Black, Joyce O'Neill, Bill Evans, and Michael Tower.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Aiken, seconded by Councillor Finney. Anybody missing on that list? Pardon? Question? Okay.
Yes.
Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. When we attend UMNB, we, as we said before, we had brought 3 resolutions, all of which were passed last year. We discussed a variety of resolutions, which are on your motion sheet tonight. We are required to pass it and send it up to UMNB if we do pass that. So it's up to you if you wish to present resolutions to UMNB as we did last year. There is a motion that someone could move. Councillor Finney.
Whereas climate change is bringing more acute climate events and precipitation across the country, whereas local governments are already struggling to adapt infrastructure to better manage the larger and more acute impacts from climate events, whereas local governments with railway right-of-ways through its jurisdiction or adjacent to its borders have seen events around many railways become more acute over the years, often leading to flooding of nearby lands and sometimes of the railbed itself, whereas local governments alone have limited ability to influence O&M decisions on railway owners, including taking preventive action, ensuring culverts and ditches are clear of debris and blockages. Whereas we understand that the cost of undertaking the required work across the country to prevent this type of flooding is enormous. Now, therefore, we ask UMNB to investigate the scope of this issue across the province and prepare a recommendation for its members on whether there is or whether there should be a request for an infrastructure fund that can financially assist in creating cooperation between the local government and the subject rail company to help address such flooding risks from drainage issues in and around railway right-of-ways.
That's motion 1.
Okay.
Okay. So moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Mitten. Question? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney, you want to do the second one?
Yes. Whereas municipalities receive funds from local service districts relating to providing fire protection for the local service districts, and whereas the funds received from the local service districts in many cases do not adequately cover the true cost of providing services to the local service districts, and whereas the funding formula currently in place does not cover the real cost of the infrastructure and equipment municipalities are providing, such as buildings and fleet maximums for cost sharing between much lower the real cost of the items. and whereas certain whereas certain municipal budget items that should be included in the cost-sharing arrangement are not included. And whereas no funds are provided to municipalities for providing services to highway that are a provincial responsibility, be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on the UMMB to meet with the province of New Brunswick representatives on behalf of municipalities in order to request that changes take place in the current funding of municipalities for fire services that are provided to local service districts, and that a funding formula be implemented whereby the province contribute towards fire emergency responses for highways.
That's good. That's number 2. Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor Black. Question?
Question.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Councillor Finney?
Whereas municipalities provide a great deal of recreational infrastructure and services within their municipality that are used by local service districts, and whereas in most municipalities the cost of these services, which are used by many people in local service districts, are borne 100% by the municipalities, and whereas the only current funding mechanism involves a complex and difficult process whereby a municipality must request funding from each local service district in their area, and whereas some local service districts may agree to funding and others may not, thereby possibly creating inequities amongst areas contributing to these services, be it resolved that the town of Sackville calls on the UMMB to meet with the province of New Brunswick to request that a change in appropriate legislation be enacted which would enable automatic funding from local service districts through their tax rates to be provided to municipalities for the purpose of providing recreational infrastructure and services.
Moved by Councillor Finney, seconded by Councillor O'Neill. Question?
Question.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you, Councillor Finney. That takes us to our added item, which is appointment of liaison councillors. I will read out, we've gone through a fairly long process of talking this through, and today we'll make an announcement of the shifts. Some are changed. It's not a complete movement, but some movement is taking place. So Finance and Administration Liaison Councillors are Mike Tower and Ron Aiken. Tourism and Business Development Liaison Councillors will be Joyce O'Neill and Bruce Finney. Recreation Programs and Events Liaison Councillors, Alison Butcher and Bill Evans. Public Works and Urban Beautification Committee Liaison Councillors, Bruce Finney and Mike Tower. Public Safety Liaison Councillors, Joyce O'Neill and Megan Mitten. Policy and Bylaw Liaison will be Andrew Black and Megan Mitten. Personnel Liaison is Bill Evans and Andrew Black. Corporate Affairs and Strategic Development Liaison, Ron Aiken and Alison Butcher. As for boards and committees, the Heritage Board appointment is no longer necessary. Mount Allison has a board, as a committee, but there's no elected official on that. Southeast Regional Service Commission, the mayor and deputy mayor by definition are the members of that. So the first is the Sport Wall of Fame. We have now Mike Tower and Bruce Finney on the Sport Wall of Fame. The Waterfall Park Advisory is Alison Butcher and Bill Evans. Sackville Art Wall is Megan Mitten and Joyce O'Neill. We have that in writing if anybody wishes to get detail. Any comments anybody wish to make? No? Great, thank you all. I'm going to take that as a good sign that nobody's saying. Okay, so that takes us to question period. Press first.
Related to the Main Street project, I know, of course, you just awarded the tender tonight, but I'm just wondering if you have any idea when you hope to get started on that project?
Mr. Acton, could you?
Thank you, Katie. It'd likely be probably within 2 to 3 weeks by the time they order their material and get mobilized, probably be at least a couple of weeks for sure.
And do you have any idea of the length of the project, how long it's anticipated to take, obviously depending on weather?
Yeah, we're gonna be into mid-October.
And this would be a question for Mr. Kelly Spurls, regarding the tourism numbers being up. Is there any indication as to why visitor numbers seem to be up? Is it similar in other maritime jurisdictions as well?
Thank you, Katie. We haven't done a check with other municipalities, but I will check on that and I'll let you know. What I've heard anecdotally is that numbers are pretty much steady or up a little bit. I don't know, I really can't ascertain a reason right now, but I'll certainly think on it and look into it and get back to you.
Okay, thanks. And are there any predictions as to, whether that will continue throughout the rest of the summer?
We are hopeful with the good weather that our numbers will be up again in July, but we also do know that not being Canada 150, I think we got a small bump because of that last year. So it's not implausible that our numbers will be the same or even possibly down, but we are hopeful they will be up.
Thank you.
I need clarification on a couple of things. First of all, the tender for the garbage contract. I'm still not clear. It seems that council did give direction to staff to issue a tender without the necessity to collect sorted garbage from apartment buildings with more than 4 units. So I'm not clear whether that decision has finally been made and now there will be a tender issued, or whether we're talking about reopening that to include perhaps apartment buildings.
Yeah, I think that the resolution was there was one councillor who is seeking more information, so that we will try to find out what information and get Mr. Evans that information to see if he is comfortable with his understanding of it. At this point, I don't see a willingness of the consensus of council to change the position per se.
Thank you. Secondly, I'm not clear on, council was told that the Laffords have not applied for a building permit, and yet they've dug up their property and put a fence around it. Can you do that without a permit?
I will defer that to Ms. Bickford, please.
There are certain elements that you are able to undertake on the property, and at this time, nothing had necessitated a building permit.
Sorry,
So-
I just didn't hear that.
So there's certain elements that you are allowed to do as pre-work to a site, but then at this time, nothing has necessitated the need to obtain a building permit.
Okay, thank you.
Is it for press? Questions from the audience, please.
Eric Wheeler, I live on Dufferin. I have, I guess it'd be a question for Mr. Atkin. The project that you're proposing that you voted on tonight, from what I understand from our previous conversation, there will be some redundant piping. Is it going to be removed under the contract?
Mr. Acton?
Not under this contract, no, it will not. That piping is still being used upstream by private landowners up there, so we'll have to address that at a different contract, different time.
So the complaint I had this winter in regards to ice and everything is going to continue to happen this following winter?
No, we'll be addressing that near the sidewalk, near your property.
So the line that goes through civic address 3 Dufferin will remain?
I assume your property is 3 Dufferin, or?
3 and 5.
Okay.
My wife's property that
Yeah.
I help maintain.
Yes, yes, it is at this time.
It's going to remain?
Yes.
So what is the purpose other than the line from civic address 3, 5, and 7 that is rotten and caving in periodically? What is the whole purpose of this contract? To upgrade?
The contract is to renew the services on Main Street from Dufferin to Queens Road intersection. New water, sewer, storm, curb, gutter, sidewalk, asphalt, road base. Redirect the water that's coming down between the hospital and Union Street, down Main Street, and then down Dufferin Street, and tie into the storm system further down on Dufferin Street.
So the line that goes through the backyards of the majority of properties will remain?
At this point, there's additional catch basins further in on those properties that water could get into if needed be, at which time that would be reconnected using the system that we're bringing down Dufferin is going to be connected into that to address that.
Okay, my personal opinion is there's a water leak, either hydrant or potable water, to pronounce it correctly. Is there a possibility that all this work, we might find this water leak?
Yeah, if there's a water leak there, we'll definitely be able to find it when we dig up the new to replace the old main with a new main.
Well, lots of luck, because it's flowing, and all you have to do is look in the storm sewer, and it is not runoff. Personally, it is a water leak. It costs us money because we're treating that water. Now, whether it's through the hydrants or the potable water. So best of luck. I hope you find it. That will alleviate a lot of water being drained. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sharon Hicks. I just have something about the information center. I certainly agree with the statement earlier that the information center is very important to our town. And I'm with the Craft Gallery, so we also benefit from the tourist traffic that goes through the center. However, it might be even better as far as the tourist traffic, tourists and other people who come into it if it was more visible from the highway. Over a year ago, I submitted a request through the Public Works Department to have the trees and bushes next to the highway cut down. They're quite massive right now. And I was told it was a provincial jurisdiction and it would be requested by the Public Works Department. But since then, the trees along the highway have been cut back in most of our area. It looks like it's everywhere except for the ones that are in front of the Tourist Bureau. So is there any possibility we could get a commitment for someone to arrange to have those trees trimmed back?
Mr. Atkin, would that be you?
Yeah, I can comment on the trees. First of all, the trees were cut all along there by NB Power, or a contractor who was hired by NB Power. That was the reason that all those trees kind of between, I'll say, exit 504 and 506 were cut down. And the trees along the Tourist Bureau can be discussed with DTI to get trimmed for sure.
Okay, because that's what I was told over a year ago, so, and they're still there. So that can be done like right away?
We'll contact DTI on that.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Moved by Councillor Tower, seconded by Councillor Finney. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion's carried.